All right, everybody, welcome to the first episode of the Something About Soccer podcast. Something new coming from three North American, primarily football manager creators, but big fans of the North American game as well as the world game. It's not just, North American, but in this story, in the way that this podcast is going to go, we're going to be mainly focusing on North American-based soccer, CONCACAF. Obviously, that's going to, definitely include South America as well, but we'll get more into that as we get through this first episode. But first, I want to introduce my two co-hosts. First, BizarraBrigade, known on Twitch. Very, very big Minnesota fan across all sports. And my other co-host, Pixelatedsuits, our native Colombian by way of New York, and a big, big fan of Colombian soccer, New York football, New York sports, and me, Los Angeles-based Dill 40K, big-time Chargers guy that's bled into a Tottenham fandom, so I love pain. But let my co-hosts introduce themselves as well. Biz, take it away. Let the people know who you are.
Yeah, no, super excited to get this kicked off with both of you guys. But the thing I think that I'll start and preface this before I get into myself is just like how excited I am to be able to have this, and really for us being more of like the North American, like our whole thesis of this podcast is being like kind of encompassing North America, and really kind of just like all of us kind of unpacking some stuff together and kind of learning about it, or all of us teaching about what we might say is more of like an actual interest or a passion or something that we know a lot about and are very knowledgeable about. So the fact that we have all of us just kind of spread across the country, I feel like is too perfect with myself in Minnesota, then you two both on the coast. It just kind of covers all of it. I feel like we just need a Southern correspondent here and there, and we'll be really good. But no, I'm beyond excited. Like Dill said, Typically, I feel like we've kind of shortened my name over time. It's more Bizarra or Biz. The Brigade kind of refers to more of my community, but it is how you'll find me on Twitch. So, I mean, you were right to say that is the name, but I feel like over time, it's really just kind of been condensed down. But yeah, as Dill said, big time Minnesota sports fan. I've been born and raised, have never left outside of a small portion of my time away in college where I went to an even colder place in North Dakota for a little bit. But yeah, my Minnesota sports fandom stems through all male sports, and realistically, with Minnesota United getting a team in MLS, just I mean, at this point, 7-8 years ago, I've been a season ticket holder for them, even prior to their announcement that they were getting a team with the pretty much with the proactive thought that they were going to have a team of their own. So yeah, this has always been something that I've hoped for. Me and my brother ended up buying tickets, and now we have the season tickets, and they're, I mean, probably our two most prized possessions, the things that we pay for and own, because it's just such a fun time to be able to go and have a team of our own. It's something we've always wanted with our fandom of US men's national team growing up. And I feel like that's kind of something that's bonded myself and Dill and Pixel about like our time in Football Manager. So yeah, excited to be able to kind of share my masochistic ways of Minnesota sports fandom with all of you guys. I know Dill said he likes Spain with Tottenham. I feel like that should almost be my honorary European team as well, and it would just fit right into the Minnesota sports fandom. But yeah, excited for the MLS season to kick off. I think we're at the point too with the season just kicking off here, where us releasing and dropping our first episode is really exciting to kind of correspond and be coordinated with that. But yeah, all in all, just excited to get things going.
Pixelated, what about yourself over on the East Coast?
Yeah, definitely really excited to be joining on this project. I think that, something that we really want to look forward to do in the future is really focus on finding players that might not get that highlight. So I think that, one of the best places to start is North America, especially with, the MLS, but also some of the leagues that we might not be, thinking of at the forefront when we think of North America, like, we might be looking in Honduras or Costa Rica or even Mexico. So I think that, especially highlighting those underwritten players, the players that really don't, get all the fanfare and all the, fireworks out for them. I think that that's kind of our focus. But as far as me, I'm a big fan of Colombian soccer, as Dill alluded to. One of my earliest memories is, being dressed in green and white of Atlético Nacional from not only my dad, but my grandparents. That's the team I support in Colombia. But through that, I've been informed a lot of the MLS, because there's been, in the past 5 or so years, there's been so many more players in the MLS that come from Colombia even before they even make their professional debuts in Colombia. So, the MLS has been a league that I've always supported as a kid growing up in New Jersey. My dad took me to see Juan Pablo Angel, a Nacional player. And through that, I just, kept wanting to go back. Even since we were Metro Stars, and then we switched to Red Bulls New
Yeah.
York. So I think it's just, I think this is such a beautiful game, and I think that, we got three guys who really want to share it with everybody. So I couldn't be more excited.
Yeah, that's honestly really well said, Pix, and I do appreciate kind of what Biz said as well. Just three different perspectives all across the United States, liking soccer, football. We call it soccer, obviously. Football, but whatever you want to call it, we don't really care at the end of the day. In our own ways, I think a big thing about this podcast and why we enjoy and kind of came together as Football Manager fans, that's how we found out about each other in the Twitch space of Football Manager, is we like story. We like the narrative-focused aspect of football, about team building, about players specifically, as we've talked more in North America and South America, coming and playing, all over the world, but getting their start in the regions in which they are from. And obviously there's stories that kind of transcend that and start in other places too, but like with dual national Americans, that's a big thing in United States men's national team history. So just a ton of stories to be told. So I just want to run you guys through a little bit about what's going on with this podcast. Expect it for now to be a bi-weekly show. Like I mentioned before, narrative focused. And one thing I do want to preface with us three is we are fans first, and I can speak, at least for myself, Biz probably to the second extent, and then Pix probably is the longest fandom. I am relatively new to football, soccer fandom overall. Mm-hmm. Tottenham fan for just 4 years. Grew up watching the MLS very, just from the periphery, like a lot of fans, I would say, in the U.S. And I grew to love the game just because of, my love for American football, my love for basketball, baseball, all the other American sports, and just seeing how much of a worldwide game soccer was. That's the thing that I love about it the most. I think that's what draws me about the story. And I think, I'm a tactics guy in regards to, I do pick up on a few things, but I'm no tactical expert. And I can say, I think all three of us are the same way. We're curious about the game. We're very community driven. We like to tell those undertold stories, whether that be in our Football Manager saves or just talking amongst the three of us about what we like. And like I mentioned before, we have a shared passion of the sport. And I feel like as we've gotten to know each other, we just have a very similar vibe about the things that we enjoy about, this community. Biz, is there anything you want to add about kind of what we're trying to bring to the table here?
No, I think that's really well said in terms of, I think that's the biggest thing that walking away from this first episode, I wanted to stress, we are not experts, but it is something just because I just like down the line, just envision comments on YouTube of like, you said this name wrong, or it's like, dude, we're coming at this completely from just just a love of the game and trying to learn and teach ourselves, but also kind of almost viewed as almost kind of an in-between from a fandom standpoint of people in our current communities that are already existing that want to get more into the sports themselves in North America, like MLS. I've done watch parties on my own personal channel that I feel like have been really successful. And it's honestly kind of, I feel like what through some chats I've had with Dill and Pixel was kind of what piggybacked this idea and kind of what started it was the fact that there is something in that space in the Football Manager community for us to be able to do something like that. So I think us kind of sitting in that spot where we're all very passionate and we pay attention to our own teams, it does bring something to the table. But the big thing is knowing that we're trying to get to that point of, paying more attention to it and kind of funneling our own personal interests and passions to continue to kind of go and climb towards learning more and more about the sport, not just in MLS, but just kind of across the landscape, like Pixel was saying too. So I do want to stress that as well with coming at it as, I think the way I framed it was the lens of curiosity of really just like trying to turn over the stones and figure out what stories are there to tell, what things are unique and interesting about, each individual team, whether it's a USL League 2 team, or if it's a team like Pixel said, all the way from, Central America and, learning about the Caribbean Cup and the Central American Cup and all those different things of how, your different avenues in the Champions League. There's so many different things that I feel like are honestly just kind of are forgotten over time in this landscape of things. So it's one of the most fascinating when it comes to the actual confederations itself. CONCACAF is one of the goofiest and most fascinating confederations that exist. So like us kind of going into it and unpacking it, I'm telling you, there's a lot of substance here to talk about. So that's what makes me most excited, but definitely something I wanted to stress as well.
No, I totally agree. And I think that kind of, in regards to how these episodes will go, this intro is obviously unique. We wanted to kind of provide a baseline of where we're coming from with everything. So from that point, I think we just get straight into it. And Pix, I kind of want to talk with you first about what football games have you been watching? What have you been up to lately? Just kind of a little update on what's going on in the world of Pix, East Coast Pix.
Yeah, definitely. So James just got a new club with Club Leon, and
Yeah,
I watched his debut with that game, and I think it was really interesting. They played against Atlas, so they actually played against. He was facing against a Colombian goalkeeper, Camilo Vargas, who's he's even
nice.
been in the Colombian national team with. But I think he played really well. He won the penalty that got them the first to get them to equalize. He won it. I think that he could have, instead of taking the penalty, he had it on his left foot. I think he could have taken the shot, but I think the penalty was a little bit more sure. And I'm pretty sure he was wearing the captain's band too, which was the confusing thing though is that they didn't give him the penalty.
Mm.
That is
So
interesting. Did he start Pix?
no, he came
He
in
came
maybe
on.
around like the 70th minute or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
I
I was gonna say
I
I would be surprised with them just signing him if they would have plugged him in that quick. But
Yeah,
that
and I was
makes sense.
surprised because at Rayo Vallecano he wasn't seeing any really minutes, so it's like he
Mm,
wasn't really, let's say match fit. If we're talking football manager terms, he wasn't really getting the game time, and
yeah.
but he really hit the ground running. He got almost another assist after he got actually a pre-assist on the second goal, and then he got the penalty for the first one. So I think Club Leon is a good place for him. There's obviously been a
Yeah.
lot of criticisms with him about the teams that he's been to.
Yeah, what do you think
Um,
about his whole trajectory? I know he's kind of he's so polarizing in regards to a player. I think he's, your favorite player's favorite player type thing, cult hero. But when
Yeah.
you look at his career, I think he's one of those people, like, as a fan, maybe in 5 or 10 years, when you look back and you're looking at Wikipedia on like a player, when you're looking at all their clubs, you're like, why was this guy moving around so much? After you watch his
Yeah.
crazy YouTube highlights from the World
favorite
Cup,
World Cup goal
and
of all
then
time.
and
Like,
then you go to
probably for me, one of
Wikipedia,
top
yeah,
three at least.
and you're just like,
So good.
what's going on with this guy's career? I don't know. What do you think,
Yeah,
Biggs?
a lot of comments have come out about, not being disciplined enough, about not running in training, stuff like that. And there seems to be there's always an excuse with him. At Bayern, at the time he was saying that he didn't want to transfer to Bayern, who he had played amazingly against in the Champions League. He even scored against Real Madrid and didn't celebrate against Keylor Navas, Bayern versus Real Madrid when he was on loan there. And they even wanted him to stay. I don't remember which coach it was, but they even wanted him to stay there, which was really interesting. And he had the opportunity to, but there was rumors that he said that it was too cold. And nowadays, a couple
I
years
can relate.
later, yeah, he's been saying that it was because he had the opportunity to go to Atletico Madrid, and he had to be recalled from his loan to be able to make that transfer. But then Real Madrid didn't let him go. But the thing is that there's always these kind of perfect excuses with him, where it's like, oh, that explains it, but it's like that doesn't explain it. When it happens
Yeah.
at four different clubs and stuff like that. So
Yeah. It's one of those, like, when it's continually happening, it's like it's twice is a coincidence, three times it's kind of like, bro, what are we doing here? You know what I
Exactly,
mean?
yeah.
Like, no. And the one thing I wanted to also stress too, why I also think it's a really interesting landing spot for him, is with Lyon being one of the Club World Cup teams, which I think is
Definitely.
also something that I think preemptively they're also trying to bring in. I mean, they're a couple of these Liga MX teams are really splashing cash. Not like I'm noticing it in MLS where they're targeting a lot of different players. I know like Cruz Azul just got went in for like Matthias Bogusz from LAFC for like 9 million. So it's like they're all loading up. They're loading up trying to get some of these guys.
The Mexican teams
across the line.
have been splashing cash in a big way, like with relatively random, not random, but it's like it makes sense
Polish
in the
player going
context.
down there is goofy.
Yeah.
that is goofy.
And I'm surprised too. Like I don't know if you saw Cruz Azul grabbing Emmanuel Ochoa as well, the San Jose
I
goalkeeper,
did see
who
that.
is he's not a regular starter there, and for like $1 million plus fee, if I'm not mistaken. So.
Wow.
It kind of goes along
Yeah.
those lines. It's probably just depth for the Club World Cup, and I mean he is Mexican American dual national, so maybe there's a play there in regards to the Mexican Federation recruiting him. I don't know if he has a realistic chance with the U.S. men's national team from like the story around him, like his playing time. Do you have any insight into that, Biz?
A lot of that too. Yeah, I mean, with that one specifically, no, but I would say like the biggest thing for me where a lot of those guys do make those calculated decisions and head down to League MX is a lot of the times too, if they're on the fence one way or the other with dual national right now with, and I don't want to go too far into this, this lane, but I mean, the Mexican national team is not where it had been, previously. So I think there is opportunity there too, to kind of, put yourself, it's almost like more scouting tape and playing in front of the federation more frequently.
Fair.
Where maybe all of a sudden you're, you're moving yourself up in the player pool as well. So because I think in certain positions, Mexico is really looking for, Obed Vargas was a really good example of like one that was targeted, that was brought in, that they prioritized because that was just a need in the actual framework of the 11 that they really needed to grab. And I think they put more pressure on a player like that than probably we did at the time, just saying, and he probably felt more needed and wanted at the time from Mexico, just because they probably put the full court press on trying to recruit him. So, and it's funny because it almost feels like kind of a role reversal in those situations, but I think that does kind of just go full circle in with what we're seeing with a lot of the Liga MX teams, and what we're seeing too with, the biggest thing that I think a lot of MLS teams are getting hamstrung on, and where the advantage still belongs to Liga MX, if we're even talking about hierarchy of like the Champions League or in North America too, is it's just the salary structures and how they can go around and throw some money. They said Bogusz is going to get, I think, like four times the salary down there or something like that.
Oh, wow.
So it's like that. That is significant. So, it's one of those things where it's like when you're recruiting players like that are quality, but we're also starting to see it go the other way, where there's going to be some players are going from, Liga MX to MLS as well. So I don't know. It's an interesting hierarchy of what's being established with like what's going on with the national teams, but then you balance that with like what the leagues are doing too. But I just think with the Club World Cup added to it with James too, it's a really interesting move for him personally, solely for the fact that it had to have been motivated by that, getting a name out that people are going to recognize too, from around the world. I think is also something too, and it's just about like more of kind of helping with a marketing move too from Club Leon, where it's like, oh, James Rodriguez plays in Mexico, I had no idea. And it's like if there are any fans, displaced fans that are interested, it's like that just helps the growth and the jersey sales and things like that. So I do think that from that standpoint, it's a really good move.
And then the other thing is that he's being paid so much money. He's being paid more than Luis Diaz, who's in his prime right now. I think Luis Diaz is criminally underpaid, but even then, James is what, like 34 years old now? So it's like, it's kind of crazy comparing, I'm not sure how old Luis is, maybe 26 through 28. 27, something around there, versus 33-year-old James making more money. But I will say the other good thing is the Club World Cup is a short tournament, which is kind of what James excels in. So it's kind of I think this is kind of the perfect coming of storms if they can get the team working together. And especially because every win is it's just like the Champions League, every win is gonna get you a little bit more money, and that money can go a long way in Mexico, much more than a league in Europe.
No, that's a good point.
James Rodriguez, the World Cup killer, despite what kind of World Cup it is. Now, honestly, realistically, he probably just plays there for a year or two, cashes out, and then who knows with him? I feel like he's got 2 or 3 more clubs in him, just the way his kind of career trajectory is going. But you cannot deny how entertaining he is as a player. Biz, I'll pivot to you. Any games that you've been watching? What's going on with you lately?
For me this week, just because I don't know, we all know, for me and anyone that's been in my community, we know I kind of like feign as a Brighton enthusiast, but it's really stemming from just like some previous FM saves that I've done with them and just kind of appreciated how they build their team. So I don't consume them nearly as much as I should, and I'll get a lot of shtick from, I feel like, a lot of my community for saying that I'm not a true fan. They're 100% right. It's Minnesota all the way. But the one game I did consume this week, I did watch a fair portion of the January camp. I know me and you and Pix were all kind of messaging back and forth about that. And it was an interesting, definitely interesting what types of names were in that camp, because obviously for anyone that doesn't know, I don't know too, like for anybody else, like internationally, I'm sure others do treat January camp in a similar fashion. I don't know if that's strictly just like kind of a North American thing, but I do know for us, it's always been kind of a trial and error, like really good opportunity to get a lot of the youth and the youngsters in. And that's always been kind of like what January has been used for. So it's interesting to always see that, because it's a lot of like, third or fourth on the list players that typically wouldn't get a call in, a lot of youth players that maybe are getting their first caps or kind of getting their first looks, their first runouts. And it also, like, I just think it always just kind of creates, for us, and what we've talked about, what we like on this, it does create a lot of interesting narratives and like, stories moving forward with the national team, and what's to be expected with some of the names that already established themselves. I know like the 2 that were super like big time highlighted on on the field. Well, actually, we'll say 3 because one was highlighted for kind of negative reasons. But the 2 were Patrick Agyemang, who, like, honestly, for me, looked like a lanky Daryl Dike. Like, I was just in love. I really have not watched him play much for Charlotte. And we'll touch on this probably as we go throughout the podcast, but Apple and MLS just did a horrible would of staggering games last year. So a lot of Eastern Conference teams just kind of fell by the wayside for me personally, because I'd be either consuming, would be attending in person a game, so I just missed the games altogether, or I would only be able to catch like 30 minutes where I'm not really being able to critically watch. So yeah. I'm glad they are changing that a little bit more in MLS now this year. But so I missed, his rise to, really, I mean, they explained his story all the way from not even really playing through high school, getting signed on for D3, getting, one of those guys that just was a late developer that found his way and got recruited, and somebody just kind of vouched for him and ended up finding his way on a D1 Rhode Island team. And then, just the rest is history. He ended up getting signed to Charlotte through the super draft. And now all of a sudden he's banging in goals on his first cap for the national team under Pochettino. It's kind of a crazy story. So I love stuff like that. I don't know. You guys watched it too. Was there anybody before I get into my other 2, was there anybody that stuck out to you guys that you wanted to kind of touch on too? Because I'm curious if it's the same as what I had, honestly.
I think I'm all in on the Jack McGlynn train. I think he's our next Aidan Morris. More of an 8 than a 6, I think, for the U.S. men's national team. But I want to talk about him a little bit later, but I really think he's kind of on that list of guys playing in the MLS, homegrown, who could go play in Europe for like a mid-tier, 6 to 12 rated league team, EFL Championship, Belgium, Netherlands. I think he should go test himself, and that's something I want to get into a little bit later, but it's nice to see him playing there and playing well. I know people consider it a cupcake camp, whatever you want to call it, but these guys should take these types of opportunities, because how often are they going to get into the team with the depth, especially at midfield for the U.S. men's national team? There is a lot of competition, and to be fair, the U.S. men's national team, it's hard to say just based on a generalization, but injuries are often a problem with our team in regards to depth. So I think there's always opportunities for guys like that. You often see players like, who's the Mexican American left wing who plays for Club America? Like, he'll get called up when there's injuries. Zendejas, Brandon Vasquez. I think, how do you pronounce the Charlotte FC striker's last name?
Agyemang, I think is how you say it. Patrick Agyemang.
He gives me the profile of a striker that we don't really have with the U.S. men's national team. I think the closest to, and they're still shorter, and I would say not as strong and lanky as him, is like Josh Sargent and Brandon Vasquez. Brandon Vasquez, I don't really think at this point right now has a future with the U.S. men's national team. He is coming back to the MLS, but I think Pochettino has tried him a few times. They've had 3 camps with Pochettino. I think he is going to get passed in the depth chart, but we don't have that type of profile. And then I think Jack McGlynn is just a steady midfielder that kind of plays higher up, and it could be versatile because we tend to play 3 midfielders. So that's the main guy for me. Everybody else, I'm curious to see what they do with this Costa Rica game. Costa Rica also fielding a team entirely of Costa Rican league players, so it's very similar situation for them. But yeah, for me, it's McGlynn. Pix, did you have anybody from that game, or?
Yeah, I didn't get to catch the game, but I just wanted to comment on the idea of having those camps of just mostly MLS talent, stuff like that. Colombia does do that to an extent, especially talent from the Colombian league and just like Northern Hemisphere, like the Americas basically. And I really do enjoy that. And I think that there's so much that can be said about that. And I'm not really sure how many other South American teams do it. But I think that it does so much where it just adds a lot of depth, and it gives a little bit more of, players that might not be seen as often. It gives them, and it's not always January that we do it. It's kind of around when, the European windows are, and it's usually against like a CONCACAF team. Like we've played Panama a few times and stuff like that.
Makes the pool that much deeper, right?
Exactly.
I think that's the kicker with it.
And then it also kind of makes it so it's like, it makes it so your coach isn't dying by one tactical style all the time, where it's like you don't have the same center backs that you do, because it's like the center back quality in the Colombian league isn't going to be the same as the ones that have already moved on.
True.
So I think it really mixes things up, and I think more national teams should start doing it when you have. I mean, it depends, because it's a little bit more difficult in Europe, where especially something like the Premier League, where you have I don't know how many percentages, but they have such a high percentage of foreign players. And obviously it's a little bit different with their calendars, but we have the advantages of being in the Americas, where we have our calendar and the calendar in Europe, where the teams and the players in our first team play. So I think that gives us a huge leg up, and I think that's one of the beautiful things, where it's like players that might have never been considered can get their cap and be looked at by a Pochettino or a Nestor Lorenzo.
I think it's like, if these guys prove themselves to work in one of the system that Pochettino is laying out, and they're looking for the depth pieces late, maybe when there's an injury, maybe when one of the better players near the bottom of the roster isn't doing well, the U.S. men's national team roster, Pochettino's like, oh, McGlynn fit in really well. There's not much of a curve that we need to, teach him. He can fit into this system very quickly, and he can be a guy plug and play. I think that's with the January camp, especially in this transitional period with our coach, preparing this team for the next World Cup, preparing us for, semifinals of what is the tournament that's being played in March? I always get all the names of the CONCACAF, competitions mixed up, but we're in semifinals.
We're talking about
Leagues Cup, is it?
Yes.
Leagues Cup is the summer one between League MX and
no. I'm referring to the
are
US.
You talking about the Champions Cup or the US
International? Yes.
Yeah,
I gotcha.
We have that tournament coming up
the
in March.
Nations League.
The Nations League. I get all the names.
I got turned around with what you were talking about.
No, it's okay. But like that gives a good opportunity for these guys to put a good showing in and maybe sneak onto that roster and get proper caps. Obviously, and you'll learn this, I'm a huge Diego Luna truther, and I'm worried he's going to become, if we don't start getting him, really into this team, that he's going to be, well, I don't know if he's actually cap tied now with the U.S. men's national team with these caps that he's been playing. Friendlies don't count, right? They changed that. So I don't want him to be the next Obed Vargas or like that Bosnian kid Esmir who went to PSV. Like, I feel like we can't be neglecting these younger guys who deserve a shot. And I know Luna, when he talks, in interviews about it, he kind of keeps it low key, and you don't really know which way he's leaning. But I don't know.
Poch throwing him that though, like in the January camp, I do feel like that. I mean, because he had talked about how he hadn't even been talked to like in a previous interview that I saw, and I mean,
exactly
like Poch just throwing that to him where he was called into this. I mean, that is like kind of a pledge of faith of saying like we're aware of you, like we know what's going on. So, and I actually think he'll probably start on Wednesday because he came on with like, I don't know, 20. It was him and Emeka Nelly, who are both real Salt Lake players that I really am a fan of for both. And I mean, we've dubbed, I think, unofficially Diego Luna as like the unofficial vibes guy of the Something About Soccer podcast. Just a huge fan of just, I don't know, style of play, just attitude, just like it kind of got the bulldog attitude on the field. And,
honestly, a body build you don't see in soccer too much.
I'm
short and stout.
Full-on South Park character energy out on the field. Like it's honestly great. Only person I've ever seen with baggy shorts on a soccer field. Like it's actually insane. Like I love it. I love everything about him. Like he is vibes pure all the way through, 100% vibes.
He's got that and one shorts energy. I have to give him Murillo on Nottingham Forest is bringing it back as well. One part
That's
of
good.
it.
I'm glad to hear that other people are championing it. That's
great. So I'll go over a few of the things I've been watching recently, and it's mostly, like I mentioned at the top of the podcast, pain. 2 weeks ago, Chargers went out sad in the NFL playoffs, and I mean, Biz was right there with me with the Minnesota Vikings.
I didn't even bring it up.
I'm bringing it up. I'm bringing it up. I can't be in pain solo.
The Vikes just, I mean, like Sam Darnold literally had a
scared ghost out there.
Bro literally like went catatonic on the field like against the Lions and then just never recovered. So I don't know. We've checked him into a mental institution. I feel bad for the kid. He got scared. Scared to old Darnold. It was tough.
Yeah,
it was tough.
It's all bad. Chargers feel the same way. Great first season with Harbaugh, and we just go out sad. But obviously, this is a European football podcast. And what have I been watching on that side? Tottenham lost to Arsenal in the North London derby. Hope given to us with the Heung-min Son volley, and then 2 goals conceded, relatively one after the other, to bottle that lead and just toothless to try and come back. I mean, we are absolutely wrecked with injuries, and I'm definitely not on the train of Ainge out. I think we need more players. I think we need we just need to get healthier. And I'm not placing blame in any specific place. I mean, at the end of the day, I'm not playing on the team. I'm not going to, complain that much about it. But it's sad. It's sad. We lost to Everton as well, giving David Moyes his first win back at Everton 3-2. I mean, in the first half of the season, we beat Everton 4-0, and at one point the commentators were saying they were going to reverse us and hit us with a 4-0. We brought 2 goals back. Richarlison returning to his old stomping grounds where he had the best run of his career. Didn't celebrate. Even came off at the end shirtless, waving at all the fans because. If I'm not mistaken, it's one of the last game. It would be his last game at Goodison Park. I think that's what the Everton Stadium is called because I think they're moving on from that stadium. So fans cheered him on. But again, Tottenham going out sad. And like I mentioned, U.S. men's national team games in this January camp we've been watching. I keep getting Instagram ads for some Galaxy ticket deals, so I'm looking at that soon for the defending champs. And
join the club.
Like we were talking about, the Nations League semifinal is actually in SoFi as well. So I'm trying to see if I can sneak on over there, but it's not necessarily cheap. So that's kind of what's on the docket for me moving forward in terms of what I'm excited for in games. But I think this is where we can kind of go into I'm just going to explain it more out there as we kind of, for the first episode. We're kind of putting this type of podcast into 3 sections. The first kind of just recapping everything that's kind of going on with us, talking, very loosely about a few things. The second section, which we're going to go into now, is kind of our grab bag. Each one of us is kind of going to bring up a topic that we've been interested in from a bag of things, probably 10, 15-ish topics that we... it's a categorized topic, and then we kind of talk about one specific thing. So, Biz, if you want to kick us off, I'm going to go to you for your first grab bag, if you don't mind. And it looks like, is the one on the document the accurate one?
It is, yeah. So I have we, like Dill said, we've kind of identified a couple different categorized ideas of what's going to be going on with the grab bag. So the one that I actually came up with that I thought would be kind of a fun one and is something that we could probably reuse as we go, more changing the themes of what we're talking about. But with us going into the new MLS season, we have a number of different players that are going to different teams, new places, new faces is what I actually have titled the Sell Bench Start category for this week. So how this is going to work is I'm going to give 3 separate names to both Pixel and Dill. I will also answer as well. Kind of grade out, but there is not a right answer in this. It's really up for grabs because I found there is very 3 very similar players based on just kind of their stats from the previous season. So, and all 3 were in previous spots where things were not going right for various reasons. So 3 different MLS strikers. So I'll give them to you right now. 1 is going to be Leo Campagna. 2 is going to be Jeremy Ebobesi. And then 3 is going to be Jesus Ferreira. So all 3 of those players have now moved on in various ways. So Leo Campagna, for those that don't know, was with Inter Miami and was kind of the forever understudy to Luis Suarez. But Leo Campagna was brought in as part of the roster build early on in Inter Miami's, honestly, kind of like post Gonzalo Higuain, like brought on as one of their key pieces that they thought was going to be something that could really help them, get into a really solid spot from a striker standpoint in the Eastern Conference playoff race. And he just was never really utilized, but he's only he's a 24-year-old Ecuadorian. Every time I watch him play, I'm blown away. And I'm just like, why is he not getting more minutes? So I think them moving on and actually getting something from New England in return to help kind of get, roster spots cleared for Messi and all of his buddies that are inevitably going to show up there at some point. And getting out of that super sub role was a really good thing for the team itself. So he had 8 goals and 2 assists in 1,300 minutes last year. So played roughly on average what you saw from most strikers, a little over that 50% marker is probably where I would grade that. So honestly, all things considered, it was for what he played in a minute standpoint, it was not a bad year by any means. But he moved on to New England via trade and will now be their starter. He's going to be, penciled in number 1 striker on the team for New England, who had an abysmal year under Caleb Porter. So that is something to keep in mind. But the whole concept of this then too is going to be, so we're going to sell one of these guys, we're going to bench one of these guys, and we are going to start one of these guys out of the 3. So keep that in mind. Number 2 is going to be Jeremy Ebobesi. He has moved on to LAFC. Just joined LAFC, drafted in the MLS Super Draft. I believe it was either 1 or 2 overall. I forget off the top of my head. But he was drafted by Portland. I do know also that the Minnesota Loons could have drafted him, and we went with Abu Danladi. Never forget. Last year was a down season for Ebobesi, and honestly, all of San Jose just collectively. They were like historically terrible last year, including defensively, but there was just no creators on that team. He scored 6 goals in 2,000 minutes played. But I mean, realistically, that team just top to bottom just needed wholesale change. So him moving on and joining a team that realistically, I mean, is going to be tabbed again for, being a semi-favorite in the West for Supporters Shield on that side, I think is really unique and interesting. So that's number 2. And then number 3, Mr. Jesus Ferreira, who has moved on via trade to the Seattle Sounders, 54 goals and 180 appearances for Dallas in his career. He's still just 23 years old. I almost feel like I should have tasked you guys with guessing how old he is, because when I saw that, I'm like, how is that dude 23 years old?
That is weird.
Has he been playing since he's 15? Like, what is going on?
No posh love from him, I guess.
Right, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah,
So
wow.
I do know that I think Jackson Reagan, and I thought maybe there was one other one that Ferreira actually was a part of the camp too. Actually, now that
he went back home to his new club.
Yeah, he went. It was via.
You're right. Okay, never mind.
So no, you're good. Potch is not in the doghouse for that.
Yeah, out of the doghouse.
But he can play right wing, cam, or striker. So he's kind of that, can kind of float amongst those spots. And oftentimes, does kind of even when he plays striker, kind of floats back as a deep lying forward. But has been traded officially to Seattle now. 5 goals and just 3 assists in 1,300 minutes last season. Very down year for Jesus Ferreira, who has at times dominated the MLS. But Ryan Schmetzer has said he thinks Ferreira can score 20 plus goals this season. Are you guys buying that? So Leo Campagna, Jeremy Ebobesi, and Jesus Ferreira. We're talking New England Revolution, LAFC, and the Seattle Sounders. So, Dill, you go first. You're selling one, you're benching one, and you're starting one. Give me the reasons as to why.
Okay, first question. Is sell or bench worse? What's worse?
So, bench would be he's still on your team. Sell your Yeah, so okay. Bench is still
I got it then.
Usable, but yeah.
I got it. Okay.
Yep.
Buy for me, I'm buying on potential. I feel like as a LA Galaxy fan, I see a little bit of that Joveljic limited minutes, type of potential.
Yeah.
Put him in a full-time situation. It may or may not work, but I think it's going to work. I'm going to go with Campagna as my buy. I'm high on the Ecuadorian. I thought he was a little bit older. I think that's because every time I see him in Football Manager is when it's like 4 years later and he's 28. I'm like, oh, this guy's sick in his prime, but he's so young when it starts. But yeah, Campagna buy. I think he's put into a good situation in New England as being the guy. I don't know if the situation is necessarily good in terms of what the club is providing. I think sometimes MLS strikers get a little bit of shtick in regards to raw numbers because sometimes, the service is just not there for them and they're playing fully on the counterattack oftentimes. So I'm by Campagna mostly on potential and just because of limited minutes. And when you did see him at Inter Miami, and they showed a lot of their games, obviously, because of the whole Messi Suarez situation, I really like him. And I think he is a key piece for the Ecuadorian national team as well moving forward. So I like him. That's my buy. Which one should I do first? I think I'm gonna start. This is really where the buy for me, it was always going to be Campagna. So I'm going to go. I think people will be a little bit surprised with this one. I'm going to bench and keep my boy, the Pirate of the Caribbean, Jesus Ferreira, on the bench. I've always been a Jesus Ferreira guy. I really do like his. I do like his profile as a striker. FC Dallas has always been known to be developing very good players from their academy, one of the better academies in the MLS, I would say. Also, interesting wrinkle to this whole Sounders transfer campaign. I have one question to add to it, but they bring over Paul Arriola as well from FC Dallas, which is interesting. Do they still have Jordan Morris?
So the Sounders do still have Jordan Morris.
My God.
He's on a designated player contract.
This front three is the U.S. men's national team failed trio. Jesus.
It is the final picks for the World Cup roster via.
Oh, that's gonna be an awkward locker room waiting for the call for who gets spot 26 on the team. But
I should specify too, that team is also legitimately going to play in the Club World Cup with that starting three right
that's
now,
awesome.
I
cannot wait for. I want them to cook just one team. Well, they're in the same group as the one that's kind of that because it's PSG, Atletico Madrid, and I think I don't remember.
they're in,
I think
the
it's
group of death.
Is it a Mexican team? Is the third one?
Yeah, I'll look it up while you're going through the rest of yours. But they got absolutely hosed with their group. It's so bad.
Yeah.
They are playing at home a fair amount of it, I think. But
2 of them they're playing in Seattle.
Yeah, they got so hosed with their
They're playing.
It's so bad.
They're playing Botafogo.
Yes. Okay, Brazilian.
Yeah, that's who it was.
Yeah, they're screwed,
freaking
bro.
Botafogo, dude. Oh my god, it's chalked.
But I'll go Jesus Ferro for me, bench. Again, like you said, the age plays a bit into it. For how do you say his name at LAFC? Is it
Ebobessi?
Ebobessi. I want to say Eboselli, but that's not right. Ebobessi, the only guy, one of the few guys that wears that like little neck protector. I remember always seeing that at San Jose. Yep. I mean, that's a perfect example of what we could maybe see from Campagna. Just San Jose. Just trashed last season. He had no support. He played hard every game. To be fair, I watched. I mean, Galaxy and San Jose have a great rivalry there. So I watched a few of those games, and I think, at that age profile, 27, LAFC giving him on a 3-year deal, I really wonder what the expectation for him is there. Is he going to be the starter? Is it a rotational thing?
You got to remember, you got Giroud still there, too.
Yeah,
so, I mean, that's exactly also something to think about as well.
But it's sell for me on Ebobessi, and again, I'm hedging my bets on potential with Ferreira. I don't think he's past it by any chance, and, he's proven that he has been a very good scorer in the MLS at that age. But to be fair to Ebobessi, I don't want to, sit on him. He, if I read here, it was in the 2021 season that he had 17 goals. The season after that, he got 10, and then it's the few years after that where San Jose has kind of gone down the tank. And I mean, San Jose has always been kind of in the tank, but we'll see. They're kind of going through a new regime right now, so we'll see what's going on. But yeah, that's my buy sell bench. The most interesting one for me is definitely Jesus Ferreira. I don't know. Is there, before we let Pix answer, Biz, do you see any future, and same with you, Pix, Jesus Ferreira national team getting back into it? I mean, we gave Brandon Vasquez another chance, and Pochettino, like you said, gave him a lifeline into that camp. He went back to kind of get acclimated with his new club and everything, but
I definitely, I'll answer because Pix, you can just kind of take the floor too with your answer and then just roll into your picks. But for Ferreira, I don't think it's closed. I think the thing that really is going to limit Ferreira is just like what his skill set is, like specific to like the position, and it really doesn't fit many international team styles. I think that's going to be the biggest thing that's going to hold him back with like getting called in the future too, because he just does like a very specific, it's like, I mean, he realistically is kind of it's more of a false nine skill set. So it's more like, when is the international team ever going to really call for that? And like, is Poch ever going to even really run something out like that? Outside of that, he's probably playing on the wing or just coming in as like a straight cam. And I feel like there's better options in those spots than him. So it's like, I feel like he's being a little hamstrung when it comes to that, just that profile of what he's going to provide. Now, having said that, I do think the Sounders is a decent landing spot. And I do think if there's, just a team that prioritizes domestic players and tries to get as much out of them as they possibly can, the Sounders are the really good landing spot. I mean, Jordan Morris has been consistently called into the national team. And I mean, in my opinion, is very much like pigeonholed into what his strengths are, and that is strength and pace. So it's pretty much like why he gets called in. And it's why he's constantly just a menace in a counterattacking league in MLS as well. So, but no, I definitely don't think it's out of the question, but I do think that he's going to suffer from what his play style is. But I don't know, Pix, what do you think?
Yeah, I think so. I think that you can never write off someone who's proven, especially, in the CONCACAF. If you're ever going to any of those Nations Cup and stuff like that, you can never write off someone who's already scored against those countries about maybe calling them up, Yeah. But at the same time, like you guys are saying, I don't think that he's only 24. I don't think he's the future of the team. I don't think there's that much, room for him. But, if there is a need for a striker, fourth string, fifth string, I think that that's someone that, is always going to be someone that you're always considering, because he has, obviously scored against those against those countries that you've faced. But I think the biggest issue is, he's a player that either, scores 2 goals, a hat trick, or, he's a central piece, or he just blanks, 3 games, 4 games in a row.
I think that's a fair take.
So I think, and that's actually the reason that I'm selling him. So
dude,
as opposed to Dill,
that's our guy.
He was born in Colombia too. So
that's even worse for you right there.
Backstab. But,
it's kind of egregious, honestly. Yeah. It's already. We're episode 1. This is crazy.
But yeah, so I think that he won't hit the ground running from Seattle, and I think that he does. He's someone who kind of needs a little bit to get settled. And like I said, he is someone who is all or nothing in his games. So I feel like if he, starts off, and he can't really mesh with his teams, the first couple games, then I think it'll just spiral a little bit until he finds his form maybe in the second season. And I think
Yeah.
that's why they kind of have to emphasize that patience. And I don't think that patience is something that he's going to get because of the Club World Cup coming. I think that there's going to be so much pressure on him. And I think that pressure is kind of something that does him a little bit it's something that he doesn't deal with that well, because as we know, he's the part of the Caribbean, and he kind of struggles against those bigger countries, right? Which is kind of that pressure that we're talking about. So I think that he is going to struggle a little bit, and I wouldn't be surprised if he doesn't struggle. But that's the reason that I'm selling him. I think that Ababesi provides a little bit more consistency, and especially moving from a San Jose, which was a very dilapidated squad.
Yeah.
And then moving to an LAFC that has so many parts, so much quality, it leaves Ababesi to really just focus on the things that he does the best.
Yeah, well said.
I would say too, just kind of like piggybacking off that point, because I think that's a really fair point. I also think that the other way you can look at it, because I'll answer this too after you're finished up here, Pix, and just kind of giving your remainder of reasons. But you can really look at a reinvigoration angle with this too, with Ferreira and Ababesi coming from teams. Dallas was pretty dilapidated and has been injured. I mean, Velasco, who was just sold down to Boca Juniors, like
about him,
that he hadn't played at all really. I mean, he played very limited minutes last year, and then on top of it too, it was like you're dealing with Jesus Ferreira and Paul Arriola. There was dysfunction amongst I honestly just how man management went down there and how they went about tactically. I just feel like there was a lot of different stuff that was just scatterbrained down there. So I think Ferreira will be reinvigorated going to a team like Seattle that is just known for, consistently being there in the West. I think Ebobesi is the one that I think out of the most that's going to come in and just try to hit the ground running, because you're going from literally the basement, consistently in the basement of being in the West, or just being a fringe playoff team, to being like the pinnacle and in the supporter shield chasing instantaneously. And even if you're a supplementary piece, I can tell you right now, with how they use Giroud down the stretch, Giroud is not going a full season of playing, every game. So they're going to be using him sparingly. And I think Ebobesi is probably going to get the meat of those starts as well. So I think that's something to also consider. And then you look at it on the inverse for Campagna, who came from a team that won the Supporter Shield and now is going to a team that was in the basement last year in the East, that is going to have to be, he's kind of the guy now and is expected to help that turnaround. So I think there is motivation there for various different reasons, but that is just something to kind of hold into, when you're thinking about these three players specifically too. It is something to kind of, think about going into it. But yeah, Pix, did you have anything to add about Campagna? Because I know you said Ababesi was kind of your team.
Yeah. I think that, you kind of hit the nail on the head with, these three kind of very similar players. And the biggest thing is I would take any of these strikers for the rest.
Yeah, I would too.
I think that, that's the position that we're struggling the most right now. And we'll get into that a little bit later down the road. But any of these guys would slot into my team. So, not to underwrite Ferreira by any means. But yeah, I think Campagna is just so good. I think I've seen so much of Campagna being in the East, but especially because he's in Miami. So all those games are just, perfect time blocks and stuff like that to watch. So just seeing his quality and just seeing, his potential, I think that, even, potentially in the Ecuador team, if he continues going and he continues, especially if he's able to really lead this team, which is kind of what his trajectory is. And I think that it takes some balls to be able to do that. I don't think most players, would really move from a comfortable Miami into a team like New England, which is something that's, murky waters that you haven't tread. And then the other thing about Ababesi is that it's kind of surprising that he didn't stay at San Jose with their kind of new project that they're building, and it's kind of interesting to see what they're going to be moving towards. And
definitely he had the choice to too. He was out of the bunch, he was the only free agent out of the three, so he was the one that had the choice to go back if they wanted to with Bruce Arena. And I do think, if there's one thing I do know about Bruce Arena too, it's that he does, he sees MLS pretty clearly. That guy knows, if somebody's performing well in MLS and he has his MLS guys, I think Ebobesi would have fit that. So I would assume that he was probably asked back, but they probably just couldn't make it work via the contract or whatever the reason. Or maybe honestly might have just wanted to go and try to, like you said, he's in his mid-20s. It might be time to just try to, I want to go join a winner and try to, help influence the season a little bit too. So I think there is that as well. But since you're wrapped up here, Pix, I just kind of want to give a little bit more context and then just give my breakdown too of just kind of what I thought when I put this together. Because I think it's interesting that you guys were a little different too on how you see it. I do think realistically how I look at it from a person of who would I take out of the bunch, I do think that highlighting Leo Campagna as like the one that's the most talented, I definitely agree. I think like that is the person that I would go to. I think also the other angle that I wanted to look at this too, if we're talking about like the start, bench, sell angle of it, is just the supporting cast that they're with as well. Because I do think that that is something that I do think that is something that's also, I mean, you can be the best striker in the world, but if, kind of in Ebobesi's case with San Jose last go around, I mean, if they're not giving you the support that you need or even service, it's like you're not going to score goals. So there is something to be said about that. And I do think that is something that is going to maybe hamstring Leo Campagna a little bit to start, at least, from mainly from just like how things were operated under Porter most recently. But I do think that is something that they were missing, was just a genuine goal scorer. They also do have one of the best playmakers out of the middle in MLS in Carlos Heel, because I think that is something that is also going to be a benefit to him. They also have Noel Buck in the midfield as well. Couple different wingers that they've brought in that honestly haven't hit the ground running as much as I think they would like. So it'll be interesting to see how that makes it go. So that's something that I would say is maybe if there is like a little asterisk next to Campagna's name, because I would definitely put him in the start category as well. That would be what I would say is the thing that would give me a little bit of pause in picking Campagna. Outside of that, though, Ebobesi and Ferreira, I would probably go. I've definitely hit the point with Ferreira. I'm ready to just like move on. I just think like skill set is kind of the main reason for me, like I said and alluded to earlier, and I don't have to go too much further into that. I still think he can be a good player in the league, and actually looking at the depth chart that I do have access to for some of the MLS stuff, they have him listed as a left wing, which I think is really interesting. So that's something that I also think him playing a little bit more inverted and playing with Jordan Morris, where they're maybe interchanging a little bit and just a little bit more free flowing up top. I think there is something to be said about that with kind of a reclamation project in Seattle. I would be more apt to say that he'll have a better, if he's out of that striker spot, I think he'll be more apt to have a better year in my opinion. But just subjectively. But and then Ebobesi, I'm really bullish on Jeremy Ebobesi this year at LAFC, because I really, like I said, I really do think he's going to get a lot of the starting minutes, and I just think he meshes so well with the amount of speed and pace they have, just the pace they have down the wings, and how it's just nonstop counterattacking that they are. And that dude is just he's just a fox in the box, man. He just gets to everything. Anytime that there's like a skirmish for the ball in the box, he's gonna win it. So I really like what he's going to be able to provide for LAFC. I would be shocked if he doesn't get 10 plus this year. So I do think that that's something that I would plant my flag in the ground and say is a definitive. But yeah, so I think that section itself, I think, is just like something that I'll bring back here and there, just based on some things that happen within the league. But I definitely I love stuff like that, bringing in just kind of being able to debate players that are kind of in the same category, or just creating some controversy within it, because I just think it always adds to the discourse and the conversation, and honestly a good little appetizer to get us just kind of thinking about MLS going into the year.
Definitely.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, well, I guess I know now my two co-hosts don't like national heroes, Jesus Ferreira. So
you learned something about us.
Very interesting.
Optimistic.
Very
we're
interesting.
optimistic going into it, and now you know what, we're at odds already, so it's fine.
All right, so I'm gonna go into my grab bag. I'm gonna put my little hand into the bag, and I'm going to go into the USL spotlight. I was gonna there was one Dill's vibe guy of the off season, but I haven't found an appropriate one yet. I don't think the off season is fully kicked off yet. There's no preseason tunnel fits to judge, so
that's true.
We're gonna go with USL spotlight, because I do really enjoy the USL. A former collaborator with me and BizarraBrigade, and to a lesser extent Pixelatedsuits, Honey Badger FM in the Football Manager community. We talked a lot of USL. He's a big fan of Phoenix. I like Orange County. But one thing I want to share about myself is I am half Filipino in regards to my nationality. I'm also half American. And the player that I would like to spotlight here is your USL Golden Boot winner, who I think provides a very, very interesting story. And that's where I come from. I love roster building. I love stories in regards to these players, especially, in the U.S. where, they're not going to get a ton of shine in the whole landscape of European football until they kind of really make a name for themselves. But even, I would say our mid-tier players don't really get shine in that way. But I want to put some shine onto, not necessarily in the basement of the U.S., but a guy who's kind of on the up and up and made a really interesting transfer after this Golden Boot season, and that is Nick Markanich, a American Filipino striker who is drafted by Cincinnati. Only made about 9 appearances for that MLS team, ended up moving around a little bit, and ended up at the Charleston Battery, the USL team out of North Carolina, I want to say. Charleston, North Carolina.
I think it's south.
Oh, jeez. Okay. I won't edit that out, but yeah, I'm not great with geography. But
clipping it.
Terrible. 6 goals what was it? 6 goals, I believe, in his first season with the Charleston Battery. Kind of getting acclimated to the second division of U.S. soccer, where we do not have a promotion and relegation system. For anyone who doesn't know that, I'm sure most of you guys know that. For any of our European audience watching, but 28 goals in this season for the Charleston Battery, which is an incredible season. He's around like a 6'6", physical type of striker, about 25 years old, I think, as of today. We're filming this on January 20th, so in regards to any news and things like that. But
so fact checkers, you heard
exactly,
it here first.
Don't
come at us in the comments.
So on January 21st, I knew Charleston was in South Carolina, but not on the 20th. But in regards to how I profile him as a player, like I said, physical style striker, really did well in the USL. 28 goals is something that I was really happy to see. I thought he was going to go there and just kind of become a USL lifer, move around teams like a lot of these players. Never really get to this type of ability. The reason I like him so much is because there is some potential for the Philippines national team. They've reached out to him and his twin brother, Anthony Markanich, who Biz is pretty familiar with a little bit because he was a backup left back for the Minnesota United here in the MLS.
Yep.
So he's kind of found himself a role on MLS teams as, a squad playing guy, was at St. Louis, got traded to Minnesota. And I think the interesting thing about that I want to bring up about this is the USL to Europe/MLS pipeline. There's been a lot of interesting players that have kind of made that jump. One interesting one that actually went back to his native Mexico is Fidel Barajas, who kind of came through the USL, signed for Real Salt Lake, played there for about 1.5 2 years, if I'm not mistaken, and now went back to Mexico. There's guys like Kobe Henry, who was kind of one of the first leapfrog guys from the USL straight to Europe, from Orange County FC to Stade Rennais. And now it's kind of interesting. He's back in the MLS this season
Salt Lake on a loan, though.
Very interesting. So Nick Markanich, he went to Castellón FC in the Spanish second tier for $175,000 around the end of the USL season. So it's more of, it's like kind of a January move. $175,000. He hasn't played yet for the second tier team, but I mean, this is just, I love this type of story. Drops a level from getting drafted by Cincinnati, where he never really got any run. Took a little time to get acclimated in the second division, which, probably European teams aren't rating super highly. They're only going to go after, the guys who are consistent and proving they can do something. And even for that, $175,000, it's not a fat fee in any way, but for a second tier Spanish team, that is still a lot of money. So
yeah, that's some cash.
28 goals from Nick. I assume that, that type of signing, that's not, I would assume he's 25, so they're looking for some output relatively soon. I assume right now he's probably, getting acclimated with the B team, sitting on benches for these games and waiting to make his debut. But I just love moves like this. And Pix, I'm gonna go to you. Do you follow the USL at all? Are you kind of familiar with any moves like that? What's your understanding?
For sure, yeah. That's something that I wanted to bring up actually I forgot to bring it up in my introduction, but that's something that, we've all discussed a little bit before the show about how we kind of want to get more into the USL. And I think that, that's something where I lack a lot of knowledge in. I know the teams, but not so much the players. So something that I really want to, not only get more into MLS with the podcast and Liga MX, but also really get into USL. I think that, I'm extremely privileged of living in northern New Jersey, where there's, I could throw a rock and end up with the USL team. One of the issues, though, is that those teams, whether they stay and survive is one of the biggest issues, especially once you get into the teams that are actually in, New York itself. But yeah, Morris Elite is my local team, and I'm going to be trying to go to a few more games this coming season. But yeah, no, I think that the USL, the issue with the USL and the MLS is that, it's very nice to talk about. But unless you go out and, watch the games, support the teams, then, these things aren't going to grow in our backyard. So I think that, one of the things that I would like to do in the future, and that's something I'm going to commit myself to, is going out to those games and, finding out, is Morris Elite even, it's the closest team to me, but is that the team I even want to support moving forward? So I think that, the USL has a lot of potential. I know a lot of people who are fans, and I think that, that's something I really want to do in the next year. So I
Well,
really like you highlighting those players.
if you want to throw a rock across the coast and join me on the Orange County FC fandom, we would love to
Hell of
have
a
you.
throw.
I big cannon of an
Big,
arm
big
type
throw.
throw.
Yeah.
But I want to just kind of, before I pitch it off to you, Biz, I just want to kind of highlight, you make a good point there. It is very, I think it's like a tier above grassroots because there's definitely some, affiliations and links between USL teams that I kind of want to say. Orange County, the team that I like, linked with both Feyenoord and Rangers, both big teams in Europe in their respective countries, and have shipped players over to. If I'm not mistaken, they might be affiliated with FC Nordsjælland as well. They always they've brought in and sold to that club many a times, and coaches have come from that club there, but I don't know about the actual affiliation. They
You
might
do
actually,
like right of first refusal a lot of the
Yeah,
times too, with
yeah.
like scouting network stuff like that. So that can happen sometimes.
I-
Which I don't know if you listen to it. Sorry to interject.
Oh,
With
no,
you,
you're
Bill, but that soccer wise podcast that I dropped is another interesting listen to dive further into the USL. Like if you want to get deep down in the nitty gritty of it, they actually interviewed the Orange County president. So actually, your guys's. Which and that's kind of where I got a little bit of context about that, but it was really interesting to hear kind of like the actual minutia of like some of those partnerships. So sorry to interject, but I just thought that was really an interesting listen, just solely for the fact that it was kind of something that I know we've all kind of talked about too with the actual affiliate club stuff with not only MLS teams, but some of these USL teams that are starting to get like ingrained into the European game, which is cool to see.
Yeah, I'm like their pathway for players going to Europe kind of started, like the first one I knew about was kind of one of the biggest sells out of the USL with Kobe Henry leaving as a center back, and then they've had players like I think it's Correa Osunita, who went over to the lower level, basically like the affiliate team of Feyenoord, to try and move through the ranks. They actually had a kind of like an older player, like a 24, 25-year-old player named Milan. Is it Milan? There's two brothers. Now I'm getting confused. Milan Alowski or Brian Alowski went to FC Nordsjælland in Denmark. They have some really good prospects like Bryce Jameson, who's been on camps to the Netherlands, and that's kind of a big thing here too, with like a lot of these American players either during the summer or kind of the off periods, like sometimes in January, December, heading over to European clubs for training camps with their youth teams to kind of get an idea, and that some signings have come because of that, and I'm going to talk about a few of those later in terms of transfers, but. I don't know. The Nick Markanich thing was just a feel-good story for me, especially, as he comes from my type of background, half Filipino, American here, living here, and, playing soccer. So it's very cool to see that, and I'm just excited to see him go and play in Europe. And hopefully he can, become a regular in the Spanish second division and maybe make a lateral move or an upwards move. But, I think what's important is these American players, if they want to, obviously, there's cases where people want to stay in the United States and play most of their career, like a Miles Robinson, at this point in his career. But I like to see our guys of all levels go to Europe and test themselves. And even if it doesn't work out for them, they learn some things about themselves. They can come back and then go back to Europe. There's obviously so many reasons why players don't do or don't go to Europe. And I think it's not always as black and white as this player's good enough, they should go do that. They went to Europe and they weren't good enough, that's why they came back. There's so many reasons when you're making these, cross-continental moves. And I think that's something to just keep in mind. But that's going to be my grab bag. I would like to kind of, go back to that the USL often, because the tournaments in there are great. They have multiple divisions. The teams are always changing with expansion teams and teams moving around just because of, the resources there are less than the MLS. And it's a league that's still trying to find its identities in many ways. So I'm excited about the upcoming season. I'll definitely be paying attention to Orange County. And I think more so than the results and like how the teams are doing, it's more so the stories of the players developing and where they're moving to, because there are some really cool USL players that do come to the MLS as well, and players getting on steals. So Pix, I'll let you put your hand in the bag now. What do you got?
Yeah, so this is actually kind of a breaking story. So my grab bag is I was going to do a Latin American loanee. So this is a player who joined from Columbus Crew to my beloved Atlético Nacional. So, I've been watching every single game of his, so I feel, pretty confident about his game. But as I was looking, I got a pop-up notification, and there's been a lot of saga. So he was on loan for an entire year, starting around June, I think. So he had 6 months for sure, and then he could have been recalled at the end of the MLS season, which is obviously now. So he is only around 22, and he, was one of the instrumental parts of bringing Atlético Nacional to the double, and he belongs to Columbus Crew.
Hmm.
But right now, we have been kind of going back and forth. We weren't going to be able to buy him. We had a buy clause, which was for about 2.5, which would have been a club record for us if we were to have bought him. And that's actually one of the reasons that our coach left, but that's besides the point. But right now what I'm seeing is that he might be staying, actually. So this is, I was going to do a section on, a player that might be returning to the MLS. And either way, he's still an MLS player. But I think that, there's so much potential in there, and I'll go into a little bit more about what he did over this season. But I think that, this is kind of the interesting thing about the MLS and about America itself, is that there's so many leagues that are kind of similar in quality, in a sense, where it's like, the MLS and the Colombian League aren't too dissimilar, and especially with, the levels that there are in the MLS, where you have, really, really good top teams and really, lower teams. I feel like a lot of the Colombian teams can slot themselves in. So I think that, the loan to the Colombian League is really good, especially, a Colombian player. A player who really hadn't proved himself too much at Columbus. He got a red card on his last appearance. And then, maybe three weeks later, he was in Colombia with Nacional. So he has had a few disciplinary issues. Not too many to worry about. I was looking at the Columbus Crew subreddit, actually, and there was a lot of people saying that they had some issues, and they were reading about some issues. There was one issue where he celebrated a goal by, and I was very happy about it because it's the team I hate the most, but he wiped his mouth with the corner flag.
Oh.
I don't know. I don't think it's that bad. I don't think it's that bad.
It's like a napkin a little bit. I get it. I get what he's going for.
I
get what he's going for.
But either way, there was some issues with discipline and stuff like that. So he had 4 goals and 3 assists in 28 games, only 22, and he was, he comes into a squad where there was a bunch of loans coming in for Nacional. We really wanted to rebuild and bring in a lot of players. We brought Marlos Moreno, who's, I'm thinking about the wrong guy. I'm thinking about no, it's not Marlos Moreno. I'm thinking about the Rangers striker. I can't believe I can't think of the Colombian.
Alfredo Moreno.
Yeah, Alfredo.
Yeah.
So we brought in Alfredo from Santos, and a lot of these loans were like patchwork, and Hinestroza was able to really bring in and come in and adapt and really, make and hit the ground running, I want to say, with, so many loan players who haven't really ever played together. Mm-hmm. So I feel like that adaptability really, gives him a lot more of a leg to stand on. And right now what we're seeing is that we qualified for the Libertadores, which is our Champions League. And, he really wanted to stay for that. But obviously the Columbus Crew would also give him a lot of opportunities too. But it's looking like he might be staying. So if he proves himself even here, he might even be leaving Columbus Crew to another team, in Europe, depending on his performances here. So he played also with Dairo Nasprilla, who's, I'm pretty sure, is the second top goal scorer of the Portland Timbers. So he has a lot of players around him who have been playing in the MLS. I mean, we have so many players who have come back and kind of retire in the Colombian League after the MLS. So I feel like he's surrounded by that experience, and I think that another season in Colombia will do him right. And I could kind of plan the section around him coming back for the MLS season now. But yeah, that's a player that I think is going to be if he can fix up some of the parts of his game that he needs to fix up, which is a little bit of the discipline, a little bit more clinical. But I think at only 22, I think that he has so much talent, and I can't wait to see what he does in the MLS if he does come back.
Asprilla, just to interject really quick, he was top five all time.
Okay, nice.
Number 39 goals.
From your point of view, Pix, I'm curious, what is Colombia, in less as a country but more as a league and kind of their soccer? How are they connected in the MLS? Like, what's the relationship between the two of them in terms of players bouncing between the two leagues?
Yeah, so I alluded to it a little bit earlier. I think that there's been more of a trend in the past 5 or so years where there's been so many players that, players I haven't even heard of coming to the MLS and making their debuts in the MLS as opposed to in the Colombian League. So there's a lot of MLS talent that's coming, or a lot of Colombian talent that's coming over even before playing in the Colombian League professionally. A lot of them are just coming in from the academies. And I think that, that really says a lot about the scouting levels of the MLS and how it's kind of gotten there. And, historically we've had, one of the reasons I'm an MLS fan is Juan Pablo Angel, which is, he kind of came, a little bit after his prime, but enough of his prime where, he was still really good and able to do a lot. He played for the Red Bulls, he even played for Chivas USA, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah,
But
he did like a solid. This is pure from memory and probably
mhm.
way wrong, but I feel like he did a full on, at least a full on contract with the Red Bulls. It felt like. I
Yeah,
don't
yeah,
remember though. That was right when I first started watching, so I could be way off on that. But
yeah. But
I feel
there's
like
been
he did it. I mean, he's definitely up there on goal scorer stuff too for MLS. I feel like so he did his time.
Yeah, so we're kind of seeing the shift of, having those, older players. Farid Mondragon, the goalkeeper, Philadelphia Union for a while, was another one where we got a lot of older players coming in from Colombia, and not so much, coming back and forth, but more so going to the MLS and then coming back, more so now. But I think that, we're seeing that kind of surge where we're seeing so many more younger Colombian players starting. Nelson Palacios for Real Salt Lake. I saw you mention one that we'll save for later too, and that guy I'm very keen on as well. The guy that you have mentioned in a later section. But there's so many, yeah, there's so many good players that are coming. The other one is I think it's Nelson Rodriguez, I think, from Fortaleza, who just joined Orlando City. So I mean, that guy I didn't even get to see that many games of for Fortaleza, which is a team that's just starting to grow up their stature in the Colombian league. So I'm definitely excited to see more and more about how the MLS goes about the scouting of those players, and kind of if there are any affiliations in the future. Right? Real Salt Lake is a team that really is emphasizing a lot of Colombian players.
Yeah. Yep.
Carlos Andrade Gomez was one.
Yeah, great shout.
Chicho Arango is another one. Nelson Palacios, who I mentioned earlier. Brian Vera. There's so many players, and I feel like Real Salt Lake is kind of building a mini Colombia, where it's like I might need to get a second jersey. And especially with Red Bulls not having a Colombianized Shambhala. But
I get
but
that.
yeah, I think it's changed a lot, and I think it's changed for the better too. Because then we see these guys kind of develop, and I think John Duran is one of the most stellar examples of not only the MLS, but also of, I mean, not only just Colombians, but the MLS overall in the development of any South American or any Latin American can come in and do what John Duran did.
He's going to go down. I mean, if we're talking even just the numbers that were floated today, he's going to go down as the highest outgoing transfer fee of all time with the sell on here, because it's. I saw West Ham floated 57 today. I saw, and it's like, I don't know what the sell on is. No one knows whether it's 5 to 20. I mean, it doesn't matter. They're adding. There was 4 million in add-ons off the initial number, and that was already a top fiver. It's like if you're getting even 10% of that number, it's going to be. I mean, it's going to be the most of all time. So it crazy. I mean, the fact that West Ham is willing to pay that, it's like, I mean, I feel like other teams too, being that he just signed a contract, are going to be willing to pay it too. It's.
Definitely.
I mean, I'm Villa, I'm holding out.
Yeah, I think it's kind of the reverse of like a lot of the Premier League looks at Brazilians before they turn 18 and try to get them on. I feel like the MLS is kind of being like, we can't afford the Brazilians, but we can afford the Colombians and the people from Ecuador. So I think that's a really good idea of kind of like pegging yourself to a nation that needs those developing players and kind of needs them to have a place to grow, and a little bit more money too, because the Colombian League doesn't have as much money as I think one of the issues is like once a player and a Colombian player goes to the Liga MX, they're going to stay in Liga MX because there's so much money there. And there's enough to, if you're a good enough player, you're going to get a good enough salary, and you're going to be living fine in Mexico, just like living in Colombia. So I think the MLS gives it so it's like it gives it so it's like there is the other stepping stone, and Liga MX, it's going to be a bit of a plateau for those Colombian players. So
okay,
I'm really excited about that.
As a Colombian American, does Envigado or Chicago Fire get the credit for building John Duran, or is it a mix? Both fandoms, I feel like, plant their flag hard in who put John Duran on the map. But I would like to hear from you, because you have a stake in both of the games, and there's a right answer, but you don't have to say it.
Yeah, I'm going to go with Envigado 100%.
Oh, just kidding.
Chicago Fire fans, supporters listening to this are just, how could
I know, they're going to be pissed.
Berhalter, Arthur fisting.
Yeah. Envigado is one of the best academies in South America, not just Colombia. I mean, they've produced, James Rodriguez, John Duran, Freddy Guarin, so many players that we think of when we think of Colombia don't come from even my team. They come from, Envigado. And that's this team is actually kind of struggling right now. They might even get relegated. So it's like, this really good academy is kind of struggling, but I would credit it to Envigado, yeah, just because it's like, I think so much of the formation, and I would also credit it to John Duran too. I mean, and he's a tall, strong guy, and as well as his skills. So I think that I think Chicago Fire kind of gave him the ability to see if he's adaptable enough to be able to do it. And I'm not going to discredit Chicago Fire, but I think Envigado kind of gave him the foundations that he needed to be able to grow.
He proved he could do it in a snowy night in Chicago. That was his
I don't think he would have been able to go to the Premier League if it hadn't been for Chicago.
I like that. I mean, as MLS,
thank you for saying that.
MLS fans are always going to be like, Duran's our guy. But let's be real.
Hey, I'm beating my chest saying that, so I'm going to keep it going.
All right. Well, do you have anything else to say? Is the bag, have you grabbed everything from the bag?
Is it completely closed? Have you tied it off in a knot? So it needs to be for safekeeping for next week.
The biggest thing was that it got kind of thrown a monkey wrench in it when, I just got the tweet that, this guy might play.
As you were starting to talk about it.
Yeah. So I think
tough.
that, the conclusion was that he still hadn't proved himself in the MLS. And he came to Colombia, proved it. I mean, he got the double at 22 years old.
Yeah.
And I guess he's going to continue to prove it. So I think that this just gives him a little bit more running time with something that he's comfortable with. And then we'll see if, when he returns from loan, how it looks like.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, I think, for me, not the smoothest transition, we can transition into the third section. And like I said, I'm going to say these for the first time, just so you guys know. Section 3 is really where we're going to kind of bring forward the main topic. Section 1, free form, a little bit of a grab bag. And then section 3 is kind of, what is it? The title of what we're kind of going where. And I think for this episode, definitely it's going to be a few topics in regards to the MLS 2024 in review. So each of us are kind of bringing 2 key storylines that we like. Obviously, we're not going to just go fully into this team got first, this team got second, this team got third. For us, that's not is really what's interesting. I feel like anyone can kind of just look that up.
Oh, no.
But from my perspective, we will be talking about a team that got first. But I think in regards to what we're bringing to it each week is, what interests us, and what we kind of find exciting. So I guess I can start it off because, it might be the thumbnail, it might not. There's definitely bias in who makes the graphics here. But my first key storyline of MLS 2024 is the LA Galaxy, not simply because they are your champions, but because of how they rebuilt their identity after a pretty poor season in the prior one, how they became champions, and how I think, and Pix and Biz, obviously I'm going to come to you guys, how the league will respond to this. So to kind of just set the scene for it, outside of, individual results and, team results, in the regular season, second place in the Western Conference, went on a great run on the playoffs where, a flurry of attacking. It was an attacking masterclass for their front four. Obviously, at the end, if you didn't watch it, but Ricky Pooch tearing his ACL, heartbreak before the finals. So that's an interesting wrench that I honestly haven't really thought about a ton in terms of what that means for the next season and how we build around that, because he is such a key piece. But our front four was kind of the crux of everything. But I think there's 2 key defenders that made a big impact too. But in regards to what the LA Galaxy brought and what they built, it was really just an emphasis on building around Ricky Pooch that I thought they allowed him to be this free form, roaming playmaker who did literally nothing defensively. He allowed his, 2 midfielders sitting behind him to kind of win the ball back and kind of feed him the ball in order to, roam and get it to the wings. Dejan Joveljic, a true poacher this season who was unlocked. A thing that I want to say, they gave him the keys last season and it just didn't work out. It goes back to that thing that I said before, not enough service, not enough support for this. Honestly, I see Dejan Joveljic as a true poacher, that he's very good at being at the right place, the right time, carries the ball okay, but the better talent that surrounds him on the wings and in behind him, I think that's where he's going to strive. I think that's easy to say for any type of striker, but he's not the guy who's going to kind of do everything for himself. He's not a complete forward in that way. I think, not the unsung hero, but I think when people think about LA Galaxy, you're going to think about Ricky Pooch a lot because he's kind of the face of the franchise, former Barcelona guy, being such a key player for us. But not the unsung hero, we're going to sing right now. Gabriel Peck was the side. I wanted it first. I was going to call him I was going to call him the Robin to Ricky Pooch's Batman, but it's Batman 2. Like it's 2 Batmans. He went absolutely
Multiverse unlocked.
insane in his first MLS season, 28 goal contributions in the regular season. And I kind of project him in terms of like what, from a storyline wise, what his career can be. I think he's 23, 24, around that age range. He gives me like a Thiago Almada type trajectory. I wouldn't be surprised if he did end up like moving on from the team this January. Like, realistically, I don't think it's going to happen, but I wouldn't be surprised if a team from Europe went and grabbed this guy because he was such a game changer on the ball. I'm going to pause right there, Biz, because I know you have opinions about the LA Galaxy and kind of what they bring to the table offensively, but I kind of want to ask you thoughts on the Galaxy as a whole, and then what it means for the league in regards to team building. Do you see any trends happening because of their success and now this offseason?
Yeah, actually, it's a great question because it's actually like I had muted myself and I was like kind of typing, looking for some answers on a question I had myself, but just kind of because I've seen some graphs displayed on just like the speed and identity of like how much speed is, and I know Paintsil is within the top 10 like in the world from like a standpoint of speed, but I mean Peck is no slouch in his own right. And I was seeing if I could pull up a table really quick and I couldn't find, I'm sure it's out there, but I'm not going to bother to try to find it, but it really does just exemplify the style and the template of format that I feel like they've just aggressively turned so far into the skid of like how MLS is building teams nowadays with a lot of just so much focus on counterattacking. I remember early on in last season, there was like a stat that came out. It might have even been 2 seasons ago, but I remember within the first couple of games there, we were watching, me and my brother were sitting at his place and we were watching just like one of the like MLS after like the after shows within the studio. And they pulled out the stat of every single team that had less possession that day won, which is just like an insane stat, but really exemplifies like the level. And I feel like a lot of that is becoming more of an evident style of like teams don't want the ball in MLS. Like they don't want to possess. They want to create turnovers and they want to run. Like, and it's really become just a style of play. And I feel like you're starting to see maybe a little bit of a counter to that now too with, the Wilfred Nancy's of the world where like you're seeing maybe at least more of like a 5 in the back for solidity to try to help combat that in a way. FC Cincinnati's doing it a little bit too, but you're starting to see some, and it's natural. I mean, you're going to see that in any sport where you have a team that like kind of unlocks a certain style to like the, whatever exponential extent that they do. And you're going to see other teams try to figure out, well, how the heck do we combat that? It was the exact same thing with like Golden State doing this like 3-point craze where Steph Curry's pulling up from the logo and everyone's like, well, how the heck are we going to defend that? Like there's no playbook of how to deal with that. Like it's the exact same thing with MLS right now. I feel like the Galaxy have kind of pioneered and championed a style that is really what a lot of people were kind of starting to lean towards, but they've done it in such an insane level and degree that it's starting to really like overemphasize it to the point where it's hard to deal with. I mean, we played you guys in the playoffs and we did not have the speed on our back line to be able to deal with it. Like just bar none, point blank, our left back and our right back were like and we have some people at the wing back spots that are pretty quick when it comes down to it. I know Sang Bin's been put up there from a standpoint of being, up in that top 10, 20. I've seen him clocked for speed before. Alangwane is really quick too, but it's like, it just goes to show that it's like in this league, it's so about just its offensive pedigree and attack. And it's so overemphasized compared to like the other styles of play. So I think the Galaxy have done a fantastic job when it comes to building their team in that regard and really having a true real deal identity and building around that. And I'll be intrigued to see kind of where they go from it too, especially now that Puig is probably going to be out for the duration of the year pending, some miraculous recovery. So it'll be interesting to see too what they do with that, putting him on like season-ending injury to see if they bring in like a loan or something to try to kind of help, kind of deal with that absence. Because it's like, how do you replace somebody? I mean, I just saw too on another graph that I think he was the highest, the highest transfer out of anybody right now based on his performance. I think he was at like 22 plus million right now.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So it's like, which I was not aware of too. So that was something, and take that for what it's worth, because it was like a Twitter graphic. So it's like, do we actually know if that's real? But I mean, long story short with all of it, I just think what they've been able to build around just their key pieces and the identity and how quickly it turned around from where they were to where they are now with just, bringing in a new general manager and allowing him to finally kind of get past this like weird little like behind the scenes transfer embargo that took place for a little bit where they really couldn't do anything and they were in purgatory for a while. There's a lot of different things that came about why the Galaxy are in the spot that they were in going into it. And it's really interesting to see where they are now and like just how quickly the success came from having a really solid, reputable coach and Greg Vanney come in, and then also a really solid and reputable general manager too coming in. So yeah, I couldn't say enough good stuff, and that's just not blowing smoke at you there, Dill, and just saying like just because it's your squad. It's like the Galaxy really are like, it's great to have them in the league because it is a team that I feel like kind of came from the depths and now is up at the pinnacle. And Puig is like a reputable like face of MLS now, which is really good for the league to have another one, because it really was just kind of what I thought for a couple of years was going to be LAFC and Inter Miami just kind of butting heads.
Yeah,
and
it did
going
seem
at
like
it.
that.
So having other teams kind of step up with like a Columbus, like a Galaxy, if Cincinnati wants to here over this next couple of years, like that would be great. Atlanta getting back into the fold. So a bunch of different teams stepping up and throwing money around is just good for the league. But the Galaxy doing it with, not breaking the bank and being the highest spenders too is also really impressive.
Yeah, and that kind of brings me to the second half of my LA Galaxy, not deep dive, honestly a shallow dive, but veteran players in the back four. The two that played the most, and honestly, in retrospect, I didn't realize how many games that they started and played together, but it makes sense with how consistent and not injured they were. Mickey Yamane, our J League signing, coming from a Japanese club who had won, the J League. He had been there, done that as a winner in his domestic competitions. And then Maya Yoshida, just a very, very good veteran center back that was brought in last year. Obviously, a true leader, a guy who's not afraid to voice his opinions about the team and what they need to improve on. I remember him. I don't know if there's multiple times, but definitely one specific post-game interview when they were just on a bad losing streak last season, just venting his frustration about the lack of fight from the Galaxy team and just needing more from, his teammates, because, Yoshida's he's no spring chicken. He's like 36 around that age, and he's playing hard out there every single moment, and he held down the center back starting position the whole season as the captain, and the guy that played next to him kind of at the end of the season is a Colombian that I didn't know too much about until he kind of found his way into the rotation, because the Galaxy's back four outside of Yamane and Yoshida, the other wing back position was played primarily by Julian Odd, an Argentinian wing back who is very, very consistent for us, gives us a little bit more speed and attack compared to Yamane. Even though I'd say Yamane is more of a typical fullback, but we did have him push up and play wing back, but I would say he's more of a typical fullback. Odd, more of that wing back profile, but the pairings with Yoshida were just kind of all over the place. It kind of started with Caceres, the other older center back that we had, Uruguayan nationality, if I'm not mistaken, with Jalen Neal kind of having, I believe, an abdominal injury to start off the season. I was very, very high on this guy, and now he's at Montreal, and I think a big reason for that is because he was looking for more money. I think he went to Montreal, if I'm not mistaken, Biz, on a U22 initiative contract, so allowing him to pay that higher wage. And the guy that really took over his minutes and was starting in the playoffs along with Yoshida was Garces. Right? Garces, is that how you say it, Pix?
Yeah.
So
yeah.
Outside of how he played for us, I don't know a ton about him. 23-year-old Colombian nationality guy, 4 games started, 5 substitute appearances. So really came on at the end. But yeah, help me out, Pix. What do you know about him?
Yeah, so Garces actually he comes from Deportivo Pereira, and it's a team that's actually a rival team to my local team, and they've really had a really interesting period over the last couple of years. He actually won the league with them. I think only 22 was when he was there, and they won. So I think that he was a really pivotal player there, playing as center back, and really he started pretty early on, so they were rotating him in the beginning. But once they got to their championship season, he was starting to play a little bit more. So he's a physical player, pretty tall for the Colombian league. So I think that kind of gives him a little bit more plaudits, especially as we've had players who are 5'4" running down the wing. So it's like you don't really need to be too tall, and especially when you are a tall physical center back who can defend those headers. I think that gives you a little bit more of a leg to stand on. But the fact that he's been able to prove it for Galaxy and gone on to be in an MLS Cup final and able to win it, I think says a lot about him and says a lot about his adaptability. And that's something that I think when we're talking a lot about those South American players and those Latin American players is, one of the names of the games is not only their skill, but their adaptability. It doesn't matter if they can do it in Colombia. If they can't do it in the MLS, it doesn't matter. That means that they might not be able to do it in Europe. So I think that adaptability is one of the most important things that we're talking about. And I think that he's kind of proven that so far with the Galaxy. It's going to be interesting to see how much of a rotation piece he's going to be with the coming transfers that you're talking about. But I think that this guy could be a very solid an MLS standard center back sort of moving forward. And I wonder if he sees himself in that light too, if he's going to stay around in the MLS or, and I've never really known kind of what the mentality is of the South American player, if they see the MLS as being bigger than, potentially a Libertadores winning South American side, even for Argentina or Brazil, salary aside, So I think that that's going to be really interesting to see. And if he gets any offers, especially when his playing time is in more contention, to see, where he ends up. So I think that he's a really good player. And I think that, Galaxy are lucky they have him, but I think that he's also in a good spot with Galaxy.
Yeah, I'm excited to see. I'll definitely have a full opinion as he kind of moves forward into this season because he'll probably be one of 3 center backs that we're rotating. I think the kind of guy on the outs in terms of the rotation now that Neil is gone and we have Garces, playing as Caceres, our other old center back. I don't think that was ever going to be a long-term plan for the Galaxy. Obviously, practically, Yoshida and Caceres are both a bit older, so getting a younger profile with the Colombian is interesting, but then, like I said, we're bringing in a 32-year-old center back as well, so we'll see moving forward, but that's kind of my overall thoughts in regards to the Galaxy season. Very exciting. As a Galaxy fan, I love the style of play. It's definitely not boring for any neutral or anyone watching the games.
Yeah.
And it does provide a interesting contrast to, other styles of play, like you said, Biz, with Nancy, and seeing how other teams try to build that similar profile. Do they want to play that same way and just be second or third or fourth best in that style of play? Or do they want to play something that counters, the counter style? But I'm going to go to you, Biz, because one of your MLS 2024 and review things is our North American Champions League's representatives, and we do have a lot of them from a lot of different places. So did you want to run us through that?
Yeah, and I think it's a good natural transition because we're starting out with the champions, and they are going to be included in this. So winners of the MLS Cup do automatically generate a bye into the bracket itself for CONCACAF Champions League. So for anyone that's not familiar, and if you are coming into this kind of blind and just wanted to check out North American ball, yes, we do have a Champions League similar to anything else. It's been rebranded a couple of times, but now it is called the North American Champions Cup. They have rebranded it once again.
Oh, shit,
but they have you're good. They've rebranded it so much that even like people that do watch it don't know. It's literally part of the problem. But so they've rebranded it though solely because there is more. There's just more leagues that are starting to get pedigree. Like Canadian Premiership is around now and is actually starting to get some notoriety and some teams sent through that with their inclusion into like Canadian Championship and whatnot as well. You have the Caribbean Cup and the Central American Cup as well, where you're going to get teams from all over the place that are starting to get notoriety and also starting to be included in this, which is something that wasn't done in the original format all the time, where those teams were really not getting a chance. But it also allows for more opportunities for MLS teams to get represented and Liga MX teams as well, getting represented in the Champions Cup. So that transitions me. So LA Galaxy, yes, we're the winners of the MLS Cup. So they do get, like I said, an automatic bid. They do go into the round of 16 automatically. So they will have a bye along with they're one of 2 MLS teams. So I'll actually go over the second one. The Columbus Crew are the other one, and that would be through winning the Leagues Cup. So for anyone that's not familiar with the Leagues Cup, that is a new club competition, kind of controversial. We'll get into that probably into a future episode about my thoughts with Leagues Cup and how it corresponds with like what US Open Cup means and stuff. But for us, Leagues Cup is a newly anointed tournament that is a World Cup style tournament. And what had originally paused the MLS season, where we kind of stop the season, take a full portion of a month of the summer, and then play it out between all of the MLS teams and all of the Liga MX teams. And then the top 3 teams will clinch a berth through that. The winner, obviously winning the Leagues Cup. A lot of the notoriety early on in Messi's career here in MLS was from those highlights that you see. Anything in an Inter Miami jersey or him celebrating is usually from that Leagues Cup run. That free kick against Cruz Azul was still insane, like just absolutely nuts. But so yeah, if anyone did watch any of those watch parties with me, if you come from my community or whatever it may be, you might be familiar with the Leagues Cup. But the Leagues Cup, I personally do enjoy it for what it is, and it does provide now 3 new Champions League appearances. So Columbus was number 1 by winning it this season. They beat LAFC, who would clinch by just finishing second. So those 2 teams are both in. But they also do a third place game. So if you finish in that top 4, you're all but guaranteed at least an opportunity to get it if you lose to get into the final. The third place game, which was between Colorado and Philadelphia this year, Colorado ended up winning in penalties to get in. So Colorado will be your third place representative for Leagues Cup. And anybody that didn't, so the only two MLS representatives that will get buys this year will be Columbus and LA Galaxy. Everybody else will be playing in the first round. So for pretty much from Colorado down, everybody else will just be playing in the first round in round one. So those were the first couple. Then we go over to the US Open Cup, which I did touch on. That's pretty much for anybody that's familiar. It's our domestic cup competition. So anybody from, pretty much amateur down, you can enter in and try to get into the tournament through qualifiers and whatnot, similar, akin to like the FA Cup in England, and work your way up. MLS teams usually will come in like third and fourth round. But we also only sent like half of our teams last year just based on a dispute with the federation. It was a little goofy with what was going on with that. The two representatives that did end up making the final, LAFC actually won the Open Cup, but being that they already had their runners-up Leagues Cup bid from which happened before it, they yield their spot, and Sporting Kansas City, who finished the runner-up, was the team that ends up clinching it just through their performance in the Open Cup. So that's how Sporting Kansas City gets in. Sporting Kansas City's reward is taking on the Supporter Shield winner in Inter Miami. So Inter Miami will be playing February 18th against Sporting Kansas City. That's a two-legged fixture in round one. So that's where Messi will be making his debut there in the top left quadrant of the Champions Cup. And then with the Supporter Shield, the top four teams, similar to like how a lot of European teams with coefficients do it, will be making it. So FC Cincinnati, Real Salt Lake, and Seattle Sounders are the remainder of the teams that make it in. And if you look at, you could go fact check me and look at like what the Western and Eastern Conference standings look like. You'll look and be like, well, those teams didn't finish second, third, fourth. Like you'll look at how many teams based on what I just named finished like second, third, and knocked teams down. It's all dropping it down, similar to like if a team won a cup competition, like say you won the FA Cup. The next best team goes. Very similar fashion here for the NACC representatives, where you're going to have teams that might not have finished in the actual like highlighted spots are going to be, it's kind of the next in line goes. So that's how like Salt Lake and Seattle both made it through that fashion, just based on like goal differential or with teams that were in a similar fashion with them, and just the amount of points that they had over the next best like fifth, sixth, seventh place team. So it's a full menu of teams, man. 9 teams in total making it into this. Granted that there is, out of the round of 16 is round 2, so you're going to have 32 total teams now. It's a growing tournament that they're trying to get more notoriety with, especially with Inter Miami being there, trying to get more eyes on it, trying to get more presence into it, and honestly trying to have some of these teams have a better shot at challenging some of the Liga MX squads, because they have just as good of an opportunity in Leagues Cup to make it as we do. So those spots could also go to all Mexican League teams if they did finish across the board as the winners. So it's not always going to be this many MLS teams making it, but there is an opportunity for, those spots to go really anywhere. And they are talking about reformatting it again, about potentially doing some league phase formats and stuff like that. So, I guess my biggest question to you guys, because I don't want to spend too much time on this. This was more kind of just an informational drop. We're not going to do a ton of just like me talking but I do think it is kind of important going into the season, because we will cover Champions Cup as well. So I did want to kind of make sure that everybody just kind of knows, kind of set the table for that as we go into it, because that might even be some future things that we touch on both in the podcast and potentially outside of the podcast as well. So I did want to make sure that everyone just kind of knows teams to latch onto, and with Inter Miami being in it too, just kind of knowing what's what with that. But I guess the biggest thing that I would say, and kind of the controversy that's come up from this point before we move on to just the next topic, would be, what do you guys think about the amount of teams and positions that are given to MLS teams right now? I would say on a typical basis, you're probably going to be somewhere in the 6 to 7 range on a normal year, with Leagues Cup being a part of it. Dill, I'll put it over to you. Do you think this is a little too overboard with the amount of teams, being that there's 32 in the competition? I mean, you're making up a quarter of the teams in the competition as of right now, even a little over. So do you think that with where we're at right now, does that make sense to do? Should they scale that back?
I mean, a quarter in that, with that context, I don't think it's too many. I think obviously there's the sneaky way of the additional Canadian MLS team always coming through the Canadian Cup. So
that's a great point.
Maybe we got to limit that a little bit. But when you put it in I was going to say yes until you put it in the context of 32 teams. I mean, I would be interested to see what percentages are coming from Liga MX, the CPL, and then obviously you get into the lower level CONCACAF leagues that are represented, that we kind of like to pay attention to during these tournaments, because when else are we going to get to watch,
Definitely.
the Puerto Rican the best Puerto Rican team play an MLS team, and those are always fun. But when it comes to 32, I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing. I mean, this is how they do it in Europe, and just because it's how they do it in Europe isn't the argument as to why it's good. It's just what I'm used to. But I mean, it goes to an extent of these are the most competitive leagues in the pool that we're bringing from, so we should bring the more teams from the more higher level leagues, and that can be argued. This tournament is CONCACAF exclusive, so we're not getting any South American teams. It's not like a North American Champions League Libertadores collab, which I think would be an incredible type of competition.
Which there has been talks.
Yeah, so no, I don't necessarily think it's too many teams. Pix, what do you think?
I'm going to flip it on its head. I do think it's too many teams.
I like it.
All right.
Before you get started, 2 picks, just because Dill brought up too the Canadian team, which I forgot to highlight with them being kind of different, but that Canadian championship team is Vancouver.
Yes,
so there is actually 10 if we're talking MLS teams. So
the Whitecaps, yes.
Yeah, so the Whitecaps are in there. They play Saprissa. So
yeah.
But go ahead, Pick. Sorry to cut you off. But
Not 9 too many is what I'll always say. Just kidding. But I've always had this discussion also with my dad about especially when it comes in the Libertadores, as we mentioned, the Colombia or the Brazilian teams, the Argentine teams get a little bit more spots because obviously they're a more competitive league, just like the MLS is a more competitive league. But I think that if you want to have more competition, and especially facing Liga MX side, and once we get into the Club World Cup, you have to be building the competition and the leagues below you too. So having 10 teams who already have a lot of money, especially USD, getting those funds and getting those tickets sold, I think basically kind of has that trickle down as the opposite of that money is not going to trickle down to a team in Panama or a team in El Salvador. So bringing those teams in and giving a little bit more of a way of those maybe the third best team in Costa Rica gets a spot 2 or fourth best team, whatever, as opposed to an MLS team, will give them more money to be able to develop the sport. The issue with those things, though, is that there's so much corruption in Latin America where, just because they're getting in that money, does that mean that it's going to be going to the right spot? So I think that, from a development standpoint, I think it would be better. But we're obviously not in an ideal world where, that money goes exactly where it needs to.
Sure.
But if that were the case, I think that, lesser spots would develop the sport a lot better, not only in the MLS from, getting more competition, but also from, the standard of just, the players that you're playing against in the CONCACAF would also grow up from, them developing a little bit more of their facilities, buying a few better coaches, even bringing some people from the MLS over and making some affiliates and stuff like that. I think that the more interconnectedness and the more teams that we see, I mean, Costa Rica has 2 really big teams in Saprissa and La Liga. And, bringing in that third or fourth team and giving them a little bit more money could kind of topple some of the monopolies that kind of exists throughout Latin America, especially Central American, sports and their league structures.
Well, let me add this too before we move on, Dill,
Sure.
because I think those are great points. The thing that I'll play kind of a devil's advocate to myself too, because I do think that
I like that.
the NACC representatives for what it is, I do think from the league standpoint and all of the pre-existing things that are there, I do think based on the pedigree of MLS, and if you handle it in a coefficient fashion, it makes sense. I mean, it is a league that has a lot of quality there. It makes sense to have those teams represented because there is quality within the league, and those teams, in my eyes, have earned that right to do that based on playing in a more competitive league. Sure. Having said that, though, the one thing that I would have a qualm with, and this is coming from somebody that actually does enjoy watching the Leagues Cup and has had fun at those games, participating in them and being there, I do think that kind of gerrymandering some of these NACC spots through a self-made and self-proclaimed tournament and Leagues Cup is a little goofy. Yeah. And I do think from a Champions League standpoint that definitely needs to be visited. And I think it kind of goes hand in hand with what Pixel said of how it affects the rest. And that would be my thing. I think there's a constant argument between US Open Cup needs to be here and Leagues Cup needs to not be here. And I definitely don't fall in that camp necessarily, just because I think our own personal federation is really getting in the way from the US Open Cup being what it should be in the first place. So I do think at least give me something entertaining to watch that provides a Champions League, something Champions League, especially if the teams aren't going to take Open Cup seriously. But having said that, I do think that if the Federation backed the Open Cup, there's a great tool there for it to be something that could be relevant. And I do think that there's something to be said, and that's a talk about another day. But I do think the Leagues Cup thing is something that really needs to be evaluated on the Champions Cup end of it, where whether it's integrating teams based on performances through, like the Central American Cup or the Caribbean Cup, and allowing those teams to be integrated into that in some capacity.
That's what I would want to see. Yeah.
Ousted. And I know that they're talking about maybe doing it in the league phase format that they're doing with Champions League now with the Leagues Cup, to try to help with the travel and try to help with just the games, where they're actually able to, from what I've been told and what Bogert reported, was that they're going to try to simultaneously run them through the season so that you don't have to have the pause this year. I
like that more.
With the league phase, which I think Mexican teams were complaining about that heavy, and that was like the issue. So there's it's a work in progress in that regard, and I'm not sitting here defending the Leagues Cup saying it's the best thing ever. I just am saying that I've really enjoyed it, but that is definitely, in my eyes, the biggest thing that's the issue with it right now, is the fact that you've kind of just like self-made these spots, and that like these other teams don't have an opportunity to have those spots. So those are just spots that are off limits. And I feel like the only way that should really exist is through your own personal domestic cup or through the league itself. Because I feel like that's just kind of it's like a man-made structure. You've just like made this thing that all of a sudden is just like there. You know what I mean? So it's kind of it's an interesting and unique debate on that, specifically because Leagues Cup is such a polarizing topic, and
for two leagues that don't need more representation as well.
Exactly.
That's where it doesn't. That's where it's just goofy.
Right?
Yeah.
I think that one of the other issues is that because all the games so far have been played in the U.S. too, I feel like it also even if you were to single out two leagues, you're giving one league a little bit more of an advantage.
Yeah, home field advantage of it, where it's like you're trying to like, well, gee, I wonder who like is trying to be prioritized to maybe get an extra spot or two. Like, it's like, I definitely agree with you. So yeah, but that's all I have on it. I just want to make sure everyone was informed on that, because like I said, we are planning to, with those games coming up here quickly. We're January 20th, I think, first game of Champions Cup is like 2 weeks and a day away. Like
that's exciting.
Like Forge Monterey play like within 2 weeks. So yeah, we'll be talking about like if we're going to do anything with those. But that's definitely something that I wanted to make sure that it was on everyone's radar, because that's quick. It's during the League MX season. It's on the front end of the MLS season. So it's kind of a unique thing where we're like going into, a lot of teams are just, if you're in it, you're going into it like pretty much in your preseason. So it's like, figure it out, hit the ground running. So yeah, but I'm excited for it. It'll be fun. The new format, and especially with Messi being a part of it, and that top quadrant being all MLS teams for the most part, it'll be unique and kind of a different thing than we're used to for Champions Cup this year, I think.
Well, I appreciate you telling us about all these teams that did qualify for North American Championship. That's a layup. That was just right there. Pix, let's talk about a team that failed to qualify for the North American Champions League. I keep whatever it's called. And let's talk about the New York Red Bulls. Pixelated's team. For the longest time, I thought he was an NYCFC fan, and I would just keep telling him that. But we got the New York Red Bulls, and Pix is going to give us a little bit of a lowdown of what they have going on, prior, to the season that they just finished, and what's going on into the 2025 season. Pix, I'll let you set the table. Is this more of a retrospective, or is this a look into the future, or is it both?
I think it's a little bit of both. I think, as a fan, I think it's really important. Obviously, we had, one of the best seasons that we've had, postseasons, I shouldn't say seasons, postseasons that we've had in a while, since 2008. So I think that, there's a lot that could be said about the season that we had, but there's also a lot that can be said about, the expectations that we have in the future, because we really weren't supposed to get to this spot. I think that, one of the highlights of 2024 are the Red Bulls, for the fact that we very much overachieved. I think that, bringing in Forsberg as a key piece was really essential. And I don't think that, we would never be able to even sniff the MLS Cup if it hadn't been for him. I think that, throughout the regular season, we saw, when he was missing, how much we missed him. And the fact that, if you look at Red Bull fan Twitter or any Red Bulls fan, whenever, they will be very, very anxious whenever there's a Swedish call-up. Because he might, even for a friendly, because it's like, that's where he got injured last time. And, someone who's kind of out of the picture now, still being called up for the national team, which is something that's a little bit worrying for a lot of Red Bulls fans. Our key piece may be getting injured, and our season really struggled when he was out of there. So I think that, when you have those players that are so essential, that DP who's so essential, even more so than the other ones, especially in the MLS, I think that, it's super, super dangerous. But I think that, the Red Bulls did the right thing in getting that, center midfielder who could really ping out those passes and really find, and especially the fact that I think he's only 33 years old. So I think that he's still in a really good age where he's still, going to give us another 2 years, where he can really, and especially in a place where he is a player who does like to run around the pitch a lot, but he doesn't really need to in his position because he's so central. So I think that Forsberg was one of the highlights of our year, but also the fact that, someone who's already been a captain before for Leipzig and I'm pretty sure even the Swedish national team, bringing in those core youth of New Jersey-based players. We have around like 4 or so players in northern New Jersey and New Jersey overall, and the New York metropolitan area, but specifically New Jersey, where I'm from, has always been a hotbed of so many American youth talent, but just American talent overall, and that's been a thing since the development of even before the MLS. I mean, there's been so much development in New Jersey, so I think that having that captain to lead them through has been such a key piece. And then another piece that came back was Lewis Morgan, who had been struggling with injuries for so long. I think that Red Bulls fans always saw flashes and stuff from him, but once he got that surgery and he came back, I think that really gave us the solidity that we needed to. And then I would kind of consider us being overachievers in a sense. We were the lowest ever seed, lowest ever seed to reach the MLS Cup. So I think that, there weren't really high expectations. Even when we were moving forward, we got NYCFC, who just a couple weeks ago we had gotten completely thrashed by, maybe 4 weeks back. We had just played Columbus Crew the last regular season game. They beat us, and then we went on to beat them in a series of 3. So it's like, I think the Red Bull season can be really capitalized by, or emphasized and kind of summarized by Forsberg's quote of saying, "Why can't we?" And he kind of epitomized that, and he kept doing it until we got to the final. And I think that there was a set of unfortunate circumstances, like Reyes getting sick before the game, and
that was so weird.
It's still weird to this day, especially with
it felt wrong, especially with him leaving too. I don't know, something felt goofy about that. I wonder if something will ever come out about that. It just felt goofy.
But I think that overall we were really, really not expected to get to where we were, and I'm really proud of kind of where our season ended up.
Can you explain this sickness? Yeah. I don't know about this. What happened to this guy?
So we were playing. We were playing for the most part a four in the back system for most of our season, and then for the postseason, Sandro Schwartz, our new coach, had switched us to a 3 at the back. We had Andres in the middle, Andres Reyes, who was the one who got sick. He joined us from Inter Miami a few seasons back, and then we had 2 brothers, the Nealis twins, basically joining him up on either side. But what ended up happening was right before the game, I guess he had a stomach bug or something like that. And then we had to put in someone who has seen minutes in Noah Ellie, but he hasn't seen as much minutes. And obviously, before final, you're never gonna be comfortable with, a center back, especially the middle center back.
Yeah, the cover guy. Yeah.
So I think that, that kind of made it a lot harder. But
they announced it literally 10 minutes before kick too, Dill. It was
really?
I remember because me and Pix did the watch party for it. And he was on the pitch, legitimately warming up, and then he just wasn't in the starting 11 anymore. And it was what? What?
Dang.
Why? And they didn't really explain it until I don't know, a couple minutes into the game where they announced it. So I don't know. It was just it felt like, especially with him being transferred out, it'd be one thing if he just was still a part of the team and it was just kind of a one-off. But the fact that they transferred him right after that, that they ended up trading him. I think it was on expansion draft night where they ended up trading him to San Diego. Yeah. And I don't know. It just felt goofy. Something felt fishy about it. I don't know. There was more to it than that, and they just scratched him because of maybe something that happened locker room wise or something. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, and the other suspicious part is that we wouldn't be there without him because he scored the header against Orlando. So yeah, it's just super interesting situation.
It was weird. It was very weird.
But what would you guys say about the Red Bull season? We obviously talked about the Galaxy, but I think that there's a lot of a case for teams like Red Bulls who I think the MLS format and the playoff format.
I was just thinking that
emphasizes the fact that anyone can do anything. I mean, we're a league with so many. I don't even know what the statistic is at this point, but however many winners and however many years, because of the playoffs, because of teams like this who can have those runs. So, what do you guys think that can be said before we get into what Red Bulls look like in 2025?
Go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, I just have something short to say, and you kind of hit on it. It just emphasizes the American playoff system. Just
Yep.
any team can have its day despite the regular season, and they can just make a nice little playoff run. It's the thing that jarred me the most when I got into European football, learning, how the Premier League, the Serie A, the Bundesliga, so many leagues are just won from regular season standings. I was like, oh, maybe the Chargers could win a NFL title that way. But that is the appeal of American sports, whereas European sports in regards to football has the promotion and relegation, and that's where the true drama, of, those stakes, those real stakes at the end of a season outside of just winning on the last day, where oftentimes I feel like in the top divisions of Europe, it doesn't really come down to the final day. It's the last few days, the last few game weeks. But, in the American playoffs, a team like Red Bulls is a great example of just right time, right place. They catch some form, and it just shows how much it matters, carrying your form at the end of the regular season into the playoffs, and, how much that affects those teams. So, it's a light take from me in regards to that. It just reminds me of what I like, and what draws me to American sports is the playoffs to a big extent across all the fandom that I have across all sports. But Biz, what do you think about Red Bulls?
Yeah, I guess I'll just kind of piggyback off that and say the biggest thing I think too with that is how much like a singular signing can really affect that when it comes to those types of things. And I think MLS and how it's constructed right now too, with the January window and then the summer window, and then kind of being in goofy times where it's not perfectly aligned with the European calendar right now. There's something to be said about how teams choose to build and where they choose to put their emphasis on when they're going to roster build. And I think like a lot of teams will wait. Like I know Minnesota United typically in the over the whole duration of the Heath era prior to our current regime they had always been a summer window team. So like we knew kind of going in, they would get enough to at least field a roster. And then we would kind of be like dealing with an uphill battle a lot of the times. Cause it's like you actually MLS incentivizes the summer window as well, where you get like certain roster stipulation deals where it helps with your salary cap and stuff like that. If you wait, because it's aligning with the European calendar a little bit more than, like some of the earlier portions of the season. Cause it's just a wider window, and they're trying to emphasize like more like encouraging like free agent purchases and stuff like that after the end of the European season. So there's reason for it and justification as to why they do that. But bringing in a signing like an Emil Forsberg nowadays too, and we're seeing this is like by far been one of the most impressive, if not the most impressive MLS offseason. Like sans the Messi news, if you take that out completely, because obviously that's transcendent. But if you actually just look at it as like full on like roster build and whatnot, like this season has definitely been like the one where I've been like, holy smokes, like there are so many good players coming into the league right now that I feel like are not even getting like published based on like the market that they're playing in. We'll touch on one a little bit later on one of my topics where I looked at them and I saw that there was links and now it's official for one of the teams we'll be talking about. I'm like, how did I not realize this guy was this good? Like what? So there is a lot of players like that are coming into the league. And not only that, like a Forsberg is the perfect example where we've talked about how MLS is kind of shrinking that gap between being that like the Farmers League, being the old, kind of the retirement home league. Like I feel like the calculated signings on what they're doing and what they're bringing in is really kind of narrowing that gap into being, what they're doing. And I know, Dill, you're going to touch on that a little bit more as we go forward. But I just think Forsberg is such a key piece to that being 32, because it's like the more you find those guys, like those 27-year-old TAM signings and the GAM signings, where it's like they're coming from a really solid European league and, they're here for a couple $1 million and they're just a really key cog and attacking piece in one of these leagues. There is such a place for that in the league right now. And it's how you're going to bolster up the foundation of the league. So Forsberg just showed he can flip it on its head. If you pick the right guy and he's willing to play and is motivated by the project, I mean, it can completely turn your season around. And I mean, you saw it firsthand. It's like you plug that guy in, and granted, he was here the whole year, but you plug that guy in. New York's a different team when he's in that team 100%. I agree with you, Pix. It's night and day. And I mean, he sadly the game that we watched, I feel like Forsberg didn't necessarily have the greatest game, but when you're actually looking at the playoff run, though, I mean, that dude just it's heliocentric through him. It just runs through him. So it's cool to see a player like that in that pedigree come. And there is more to come too with it for not just the Red Bulls, but the league. So yeah, very excited for you, Pix, because I think if Red Bulls hit this window here correctly and bring in the right pieces, they could definitely do a little something for sure.
Yeah, definitely. And now we're going to talk about why they haven't done the right moves and how we're basically going to return to the same
right?
thing.
Big if. Yeah. Already so far swing and miss, like in our opinion, on what they've been doing so far.
Yeah, so one of the deals that we made, and obviously for people who aren't into the MLS, there's a number of players that you can have on a team called DPs, which are designated players, which are basically players that don't count towards your salary cap. So hypothetically, you could pay them as much as you want, and they won't be counting towards the net total. So these players are extremely important because they're players who deserve that more money and are players that you really want to make a statement, such as Forsberg and stuff like that. Unfortunately, Red Bulls in the new season brought in a new DP in Choupo-Moting, who I think is a very talented player. I think he was great at Bayern 2 seasons ago or 3 seasons ago. He had an amazing season. But the issue is that I would have been super happy if Moting was announced if it hadn't been for a DP signing, because it's a little bit of that opportunity cost in a sense.
Yeah.
Choupo-Moting hasn't played in over 9 months at this point. So it's, a player who I think is maybe like 36, hasn't played since he was maybe 34, 35. Yep. So it's, it's a big risk on a DP. And I think that, if it wasn't a DP, then it doesn't matter. He gets injured, then he's just going to be sitting around.
Yeah, the expectations there, right? Where it's like, it's honestly like that. It's that like, that whole insignia of that DP is always going to be next to his name, where it's like, I mean, you're expecting that guy, realistically on that signing, you're expecting that guy to go over 2,000 minutes this year.
Exactly.
I don't know if a 35-year-old is going to be able to do that. I got to be perfectly honest.
Yeah, and I think the other issue with Choupo-Moting is just the fact that he's so old, and I think that if we had brought in someone who was a little bit younger in a sense, to replace Van Zier and make it so that we had a focal striker that could feed Forsberg, I think that would have provided a lot of opportunities in just our attacking and our finishing, which is something that we really lacked. I think we've gotten rid of Elias. I forget where he went, maybe San Jose or something. We got rid of Elias. I think Van Zier there's some interest from him in Europe. So I think it's just very disappointing to have him as a DP. We brought in Alexander Hack from the Bundesliga, who's a little bit of an older center back, which I don't really mind too much, just because he's basically a replacement for Reyes, but I think that we still need a couple more pieces. And then one of the biggest ones that I wanted to talk to you guys and kind of see if this is the right move is John Tolkien moving on to Holstein Kiel, which is a team that's currently battling relegation in the Bundesliga. So I think that him moving is a good idea. I want to see if he had a lot of offers throughout being rumored. We didn't really hear about which exact clubs, but there was always, there was interest last year, there was interest this year. So the fact that he's going into this side, I think that I want to hear your thoughts on it first, but I think that there's a lot that could be said about, is this the right move and is this the right club to choose? And should he have waited? Should he have moved on when he was a little bit? I mean, I think that the Red Bulls reaching the MLS Cup gave him a little bit more of a reputation boost, but I think that there has been a lot of flaws in his game this season that have been kind of shown. So I kind of wanted to hear your thoughts on, do you guys think that Kiel is the right move? Do you guys think that he should have waited? Do you guys think that he is someone who might be even considered for the U.S. National team in the future too? He was part of the camp, I think, against Venezuela. I don't know if he played though.
I think he also went back to the club to prepare for Kiel. He was in that same Jalen Neal, Jesus Ferreira type vibe, but I can take it first. From a player development standpoint, outside of Red Bulls, I think it is a good move. I think for Red Bulls, obviously you're losing a key player. That's just an obvious statement. But I think for his development, I think it's not necessarily now or never, but it's now or never, like in the next year or two, for him to make a move to Europe. And I think this is a really good opportunity for him, because $2.5 million fee being paid for a guy to a club that is battling relegation. I think the expectation is he comes and tries to help keep them up. So the expectation is a good amount of playing time in a top division. So I think that's what you want out of a U.S. men's national team prospect type player who's going to go challenge himself. If they stay up, that's good, because he most likely helped that situation. If they go down, he's in a Gianluca Busio, Tanner Tessman at Venezia to last season and the season before, helping a team that can play in the Serie A but have kind of been going back and forth, but we're key pieces to that team. And it kind of sets a roadmap for, those mid-tier American players who can go play in Europe and have success. And it kind of gives them a good point of reference for how good they are compared to, European players, compared to their U.S. men's national team counterparts. I think a good point of reference is Tanner Tessman leaving Venezia to go play in the French Ligue 1. I forget, I think it's for Lyon, if I'm not mistaken, but not really breaking into the lineup the same way he was a key player at Venezia.
I just saw, too, there was some Serie A interest today for him as well.
Yeah, and I was so confused as to why he left. I think he got he got a bigger wage in Ligue 1, but he could have been a key player fighting with Venezia alongside Busio in a really good situation. So if Tolkien succeeds, I think that's like the roadmap of type of career that he can have, which I really like for him. I think this is the time to go. I don't think he should keep waiting, because I feel like he could be a guy that kind of gets stuck in the MLS if he doesn't go. He could be like a Miles Robinson type player, very key player in the MLS, but maybe his time is gone, and he might be a Jordan Morris type player. He could be like a James Sands player who goes, comes back, goes again. There's a lot of different roadmaps for players like this. So I don't know, Biz, what do you think about Tolkien's move?
I just think profile of a player like that typically has a little bit better of a track record of sticking over in Europe too. I think like outside backs that have been American, like that I can remember over time that have made the move when they've been younger, have just like had a little bit better of a time panning out than maybe some other positions. And I don't know if that's just something about maybe the profile of the style of players that kind of come out of the American systems or whatever it might be. But yeah, I mean, he's 22. So I think it's time. If you're going to do it, I think do it. Even if it's not necessarily to maybe like one of your dream teams. I think getting into a team that is going to prioritize, like you said, it's more playing time more than anything. So it's go play, see if you can do it, regardless of what it looks like, and get some games under your belt. And I think even just from a standpoint of him personally, like if I'm the Red Bulls, I probably don't want him to go for what realistically I'd be a little bummed. Just based on what the transfer fee is. But it's like, at the same time too, it's like if he's not there and he doesn't want to be there, then it's just like, you got to move him. So it's one of those things. And I would assume, I didn't see, but I'm assuming you guys retained some sell on with him in some capacity. Yeah.
I think so.
So, I mean, you're also going to have that too, where it's like, if it does work out, that's really what you're banking on a $2 million deal, if that's the case too. So I personally really like it. I think Bundesliga suits him. So, we'll definitely see, but I think it's all a matter of just getting some games under his belt. If we're talking about it too from just the lens of U.S. men's national team, I mean, you have to do this move if you want to get noticed. It's borderline essential for his actual career itself to, get over there now and try to be, especially with the competition you're dealing with on that side of the ball right now, with some of the positional players that we have in that spot. It's like that's probably one of our deeper spots, if I'm being honest right now. So yeah, definitely something to think about if I'm him.
And something I really like that you said, Dill, was actually just the idea of, you mentioned Venezia with having those players that have, been in the first division and then the second division of fighting both. So I think that even if Tolkien's team does get relegated, I think, fighting for that promotion or fighting to stay in, fighting against relegation gives it's such a different beast, and you're having so many dynamic opponents. You could face Dortmund one day and then you're facing another relegation candidate. Yeah. Whereas if you do get relegated, then you are one of the top dogs in the second division. The Bundesliga too is, one of the best second division, one of the most supported second divisions. I think, the Bundesliga 2 fans are insane. Just like the championship, I think gets so much credit. I think Bundesliga 2 deserves a lot of credit. So I think that, it's going to be a little bit intimidating Tolkien, because Red Bull Arena honestly does not get, super packed. So seeing Tolkien, kind of face up against those really, really tough German fans, and that atmosphere is going to be a good challenge. And especially gonna, if you can adapt there, then he can, move on to another team, and especially, move forward with the men's national team, and maybe being a rotation piece for, Jedi and stuff like that moving forward.
All right, so with that, New York Red Bull talk, we did want to kind of talk about one final thing in regards to the MLS 2024 in review, and it's kind of a tale of two different, top clubs in the league and their performance this year, and kind of contrasting their stories. And Pix is going to take this one as well. So we got Inter Miami and Atlanta. So Pix, you kind of want to run us through this?
Yeah, so I think that, that game 3 that they had Inter Miami versus Atlanta United might be one of the best games of the MLS 2024 season, and not just the postseason. But I think that, there's so many different things that we could talk about there, and I think obviously the biggest outcome is the fact that Messi and his team in Miami lost in game 3 against
Can I interject?
Yeah, of course.
The biggest thing was that they lost to Brad Guzan.
I was gonna say I
think that's the biggest story. like that was insane. But continue. Sorry.
Yeah, I mean,
just had to give credit where it's due.
Exactly. I mean, it was really Brad Guzan's team because they were missing so many pieces. They were missing, Giacomakis, Caleb Wiley. They were missing Thiago Almeida. So it's like a very toothless, anemic Atlanta United, a team that, wasn't even in the playoffs if it hadn't been for the wild card, which is something that, our European audience might not understand. So the way that the playoffs work is that the top 8 teams move forward, but to fight for that 8th spot, 9 and 8 fight each other to see who faces, and who goes through for the playoffs. So it was Atlanta versus Montreal to go through. And Atlanta have been struggling this season a little bit. I think, obviously, as I mentioned, they lost a lot of key players. Next season, they're really building up, and we'll touch on that a little bit. But I think that, Atlanta were missing so many key pieces. So it was a huge upset. Guzan really, brought his team forward, and really, with his saving and his shot stopping, there were so many chances where, Inter Miami should have scored, where Guzan just said, "No, you're not going to beat me,"
and not push me into the net and allow me to not get
exactly.
back up.
Exactly. I think that's one of
future memes for the podcast will be used on Twitter for that. You can best believe.
So I think Atlanta were just super impressive in being able to say, despite the fact that we came in 9th, we're not gonna just we're not gonna roll over to Messi, and we're gonna stand our ground. And I think that there could be a lot said about that. So building in 2025, they're looking to maybe spend a rumored around 20 million on the Sunderland striker Emmanuel Latte. I don't know how to pronounce it. Latte.
I think it's Latte Lath, I believe, is what I've heard it say. That taking it with a grain of salt. I've heard other people say it, so I don't know if it's right, but that's what I've heard.
So that's a championship player who's scored an immense amount of goals coming to Atlanta United really shows a statement of intent, as well as the fact that they're even just being linked to a return with Almiron.
That's confirmed. That's confirmed today.
Today Fab tweeted it.
Oh shit! Okay.
Like probably right before we went live, to be honest.
So I have another situation where I just the tweet got posted before I could see it.
It's 10 million plus, I think some incentives is what I saw. So, and that's what Bogart's been rumoring for a while now. So so long as it's like, I think they do still have to do like him flying over and like doing the medical and stuff. But so long as that's all good, but we got to hear we go from Fab. So that's
even more so. I mean, it's not just a rumor; it's the return of a player who played for Newcastle,
most important player in Atlanta United history. Coming back.
Yeah. Honestly. So I think that, that gives them the identity that they were kind of lacking this season. And I think it's going to be really exciting to see what they move forward. But moving on to, the team that won the Supporter Shield and broke a points record. They got the most points, but still came up short. So, I kind of wanted to ask you guys a little bit about, does the Supporter Shield matter, especially when it comes to, we have so many competitions, North American Champions Cup, we have Leagues Cup, all these, balancing. Does it even matter if you're in the top 8? Does it even really matter that much to get, those few extra points if you're first? Or does this? I mean, we've even seen the Supporter Shields. There's been so many teams that win it who haven't even gotten to the MLS Cup final. Red Bulls in 2018 has been one example. New England Revolution in 2021 as well. Teams that win the regular season in terms of Supporter Shield, but can't do it in the postseason. So, do you guys have any thoughts on that when it comes to the Supporter Shield, and kind of, does it even matter getting all those points if you can't do it in the postseason, if you can't do it in the best of 3?
You want me to field that one, Dill, or you want to take that one?
I mean, I
think we're both. I think we're in unison on it, so I feel like you can go for it.
Yeah, I feel like every other American sport, you can be a regular season hero and a playoff dud, and that just means you're a fraudulent team. So it's never really done a ton for me, as with my experience in American sports. The regular season oftentimes is a statement of intent of who you are for the playoffs, and you really need to show that you can do it in the big moments in the playoffs. And I think that's kind of something that's a little bit jarring for maybe some European players that come over to the MLS, especially the way the MLS works it, where only one of the playoff rounds is the best of 3 and the others are a best of 1. It's kind of a janky setup that really
Definitely.
gives itself to balance the playing field of best team on this day, as opposed to, you know, the 2 legs that we're accustomed to in Europe outside of a final. But yeah, for me, the Supporters Shield, it doesn't do anything for me. It's not the one that I look at. The playoff champion is my champion, and these other smaller tournaments, you know, they played through, you know, through legs and things like that to find the way in. Biz, I think you're the same way, or?
Yeah, I think like you can kind of just go through context clues throughout the Confederation too, and see kind of like what is prioritized. I mean, LA Galaxy are getting a bye in the Champions Cup. Inter Miami is, so I think like that in itself just shows what the Confederation, you know, weighs more over it. I understand the whole. I mean, it's going to be a timeless argument with, especially with a lot of our own personal communities coming from the Football Manager territory, where I mean, there's a fair amount of European audience that is really. I mean, it's the way that it's always been done over there, and it's the long term duration of having that style of, you know, best of the best rises itself up through playing each other through regular season and whatnot. And honestly, in the American model, it depends on the sport that you're looking at, but it's not always necessarily the case, because there are oftentimes more teams than a lot of the European leagues will have as well. So you're having a lot of times where, because it is such a, I think the thing that gets forgotten a lot of times, and the thing that actually is kind of a unique portion of this argument that gets glossed over a lot of times, but it really is the amount, like how big the United States is. And I think a lot of people really forget that when you're not here, but the amount of travel, the fact that most of our franchise sports have 30 teams, 32 teams, where it is like, you're not playing everybody all the time, you know, through the regular season. So it's like, it is formatted in a certain way just because you won the regular season. In a lot of our sports, you might not be playing every single team. And it's like, maybe, I know, for example, it's already being alluded to for a couple of the NFL teams, like the Vikings were accused of it this year with having kind of a weaker schedule and getting exposed in the first round of the playoffs right away. So it's like, there are things like that where it really does, it does have some weight to it, and I do think it's an accomplishment, specifically in MLS, where, I mean, it's another perfect example. You have the East plays each other like on their side, but what if the East is weak that year? It's like Inter Miami only plays 6 teams from the West in total every season.
Is that not always the story with the NBA? Like every year, East versus West conference. Exactly. So it's like there's always weight on one side or the other, and it's why it's done that way. And I think what the talk is now over time is the fact that these leagues could grow to the point where they're, you know, self-sustaining 18-18, 20-20, where all of a sudden we do have where they're doing we're doing a full league phase, but it cuts down on the geography portion of it. And then all of a sudden, then you have a game at the end where the top 2 winners are going head to head, or you're still sending 8 on both sides, or whatever it looks like. So there's a lot of different ways that you could go about it, and we won't go all the way into playoff format and like the stuff with it. But I definitely do champion the idea that I love things that are unique in what makes it different. And I think us going into world football and really investigating and getting accustomed to like how all of these other European leagues format and the fact that our own league in our backyard is so different and goofy in my opinion, in like the best ways possible. Like, so I personally love that angle of it, solely for the fact that you have this weird, goofy best of 3 that ends in penalty, like with like no extra time, and like where you're getting a home field game guaranteed, and you have this weird like wild card game with a win and in situation too for like the 8 versus the 9. Like nowhere else in the world is doing anything like that. Like it's just it's the best. So like I think just from that, and for people that want to get involved in the league, just like MLS, and I mean there's other leagues too that we will cover in this podcast, but MLS is just so in its own like little world like when it comes to that stuff, and it's what makes it so consumable and different in my opinion. But I think it oh sorry
oh go ahead.
I just think it lends itself to that narrative of, you know, what does America, you know, as the United States as a country want, how do they want to be perceived in terms of what the MLS is? Do we want to be Europe light in regards to how we are creating our league? I don't think that's necessarily the way to go, especially when you reference geography. If we were ever to introduce a promotion relegation type system, that is an obstacle for us. The league is so big team wise compared to, you know, some of these other European leagues, and it's like that's where I think the MLS gets shtick from Europe and other, audiences of football. It's like, oh, well, if you're trying to be too much like Europe, you're just a worse version. But if you're too much doing your own thing, it's like, what the hell are you doing? It's like, I think it's okay for us to be our own thing and find what works here, as long as the level of play and the style of play is competitive and entertaining. That's what really matters. I don't think all the nuances of how the league specifically works needs to be the focus all the time. And I think people kind of get really, keyed in on that. I think what's important is, the play, and how we get there obviously is because of those nuances, because, some players won't come here because of certain things like that. But I think we're putting ourselves as a league in a better situation. And I think the things that are presented in terms of who's coming in, the players that are going out, I think we're trending in the right direction. So,
yeah.
And let me just add really quick too, just because I did just a quick little Google search on like what we're talking about. And I was hoping I could find another chart, because I saw a chart of like they were charting out every single team's like travel distance and compared it. I saw it compared to like European leagues, and it's like, it is insane the difference. But so this was back in 2018, and it's already grown from there because there's been more teams added. But the largest travel distance in this, like in the MLS right now, is if the Whitecaps played Inter Miami, which does happen from time to time when they're doing the crossover in league. I actually think it happened last year. In the furthest apart teams in the MLS at 2,801 miles away from each other. That's how far we're talking. And then if you're talking about Vancouver Whitecaps from traveling the longest distance in the regular season itself, it was over 51,000 miles logged over the year. So it's like, when you're talking about like some of these teams and even if they're from a distance in England and, traveling by bus, and they have the 4 or 5 hour rides if they're way up in the northern portion of the country. It's like it's nothing even in the same stratosphere as what I mean. It's every single team that you're traveling to, you're on plane, guaranteed. Almost even like for us, Minnesota to Chicago, it's like even then you're probably still doing it, and that's considered close. Like, so it's like it really is something that like really it gets glossed over. So,
and that's the benefit too of an MLS infrastructure that allows the teams to travel by plane. You have to think in our lower divisions that's not always the case either. And that's where the teams are going to get promoted from. So like you have to think about those things too. So
definitely.
Yeah. And I think the other thing is that I think the playoff format that we have is kind of, I think obviously with so many Latin American sports having those playoff formats, it makes it really easy for the South American and Latin American players to, adapt. And I think that, playoffs in soccer is the American way. And I mean American, not just USA, but
Americas.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so
definitely.
There's only two, I think Brazil and Argentina are the only ones who are still using the league format. So I think that, it's the way that most of the Americas work. So the MLS is just kind of adding its own spin. But then moving on to kind of what Miami is going to be looking like in 2025. So they brought in Javier Mascherano, who was an Argentine U20s or U22s coach. And, I watched him play or coach, and he was really, really awful. He even
I was not expecting you to say that.
Even ask Argentine fans about what they think of him. He got to the point where he resigned because he hadn't gotten the team. I'm pretty sure the way it worked was that it was split into two groups, the South American Championship, and he wasn't able to pass one of the groups. And I think they only had like one difficult team, either Brazil or Colombia or something like that, and they still weren't able to pass with Argentina, which is one of the most the countries that develops the most amount of youth players in South America and the world overall. So the fact that he wasn't able to get them, especially as a player who I think just a player like Mascherano, who's been playing on the national team, is a midfielder, is someone who all the players who've played under him know from watching him growing up. I think the fact that he couldn't get them running on a U20 style gives me a lot of worry for Inter Miami looking forward, especially as it's kind of a buddy team of players that he's played with. Messi's played with, Alba's played with.
This is giving me LeBron coaching the Lakers vibes, where they bring in the coach who's not great. But
JJ Redick. You calling Javier Mascherano?
No. Before the guys before. JJ Redick, I like him. But
so I'm really interested to see, and I kind of wonder do you guys think that the expectations are, are they expected to win, and go for the Shield again? Are they expected to go for the MLS Cup with having Messi and kind of having all that, a really stacked roster? Are they expected to not underperform like they did this year? I mean, they already kind of are shaking that off from them and, licking their wounds from that and understanding that, this playoff format and the MLS overall is a little bit tougher than we expected. And it's not what we expected, especially once they got to game 3. So I kind of wonder what you guys think are the expectations of Mascherano and, what will happen to him if he doesn't reach him.
I mean, he's going to go as far as these old guys will take him. I don't think what he's going to bring is going to be the difference in regards to, like you said, that these guys, Jordi Alba, Suarez, Messi, proven legendary winners. They want to win this league, and it's like that. Like they definitely want to, they're going to win the league as a result of being good in the regular season and carrying that into the playoffs. So I think it's just an expectation of those type of uber competitive players. Like they want to win the league. They want to prove that they can come here at this age and dominate. I don't think that, is lost on any of them, especially the way they reacted to being knocked out by Atlanta. Jordi Alba, I think he was the guy very, very critical of the playoff system. And, you just got Brad Guzan, bro. So Biz, I want to hear what you think. Similar or...
I'm expecting Inter Miami to win everything this year, legitimately, because I think the biggest reason why though is they've been really thoughtful and pragmatic about bringing in some younger pieces. So I think that's something that they have been aware of that needs to be changed. Even looking at it too. So to give you guys a little bit for anybody that is newer and just kind of hopping on as part of our communities that maybe wants to get into MLS. So MLS, Pixel touched on it earlier with the designated player setups, but right now they've kind of switched and amended the ability to allow different roster builds with a new initiative with the under 22 initiative that kind of came into the fold a few years back and have allowed an additional roster spot with that. So you can choose kind of which way you want to build your roster. And designated players, you can do 3 total senior designated players, but you can also choose to do 2 and then have 4 under 22 initiative spots. If you do 3, you get only 3 of them. So teams have to kind of choose how they want to prioritize that. And so weirdly enough, I would have always expected just with Messi's pedigree that they would have gone 3. But as of right now, Inter Miami's done a 2-4 build. And I kind of like what they've done with it. And then also have kind of added some sneaky TAM signings that aren't part of designated player spots. So signing a left center back from River Plate, for example, that's in his mid-20s, I think is a good signing. Telesco Segovia was just confirmed and officially signed. He's a 21-year-old Venezuelan playmaker. Really, really good. So I think that's something that's really interesting. Tadio Allende, who comes from Celta Vigo at 25. So it's there's players all of a sudden that are coming from places that Inter Miami was not even sniffing a year or 2 ago. And that's even with Messi. So it's players are starting to kind of come into the fold and be all right, they won Supporter Shield. They have Mascherano here now too, just from a name standpoint. They're throwing money around and paying what I want to be paid. So 4 under 22 initiatives, Thomas Avilas, who was there last year, Facundo Farias, who a lot of people forget about, who is still there, but he was injured all year last year. So he's still potentially there. That's kind of up in limbo if he's going to play. Then Federico Redondo, who's got a little bit more of the kind of possession-ish guy who's just kind of there to kind of move the ball and kind of just move it from side to side, kind of that vibe. Then they have Kremeski still, and then had 1 under 22 guy that they moved out. So it's those 2 plus Busquets and Messi. And I've kind of heard too that Alba might be a 3rd designated player based on salary. Okay. So they might move somebody around still. So that's kind of where they're at from where their roster is right now. But it's interesting to see too, just some of those names that have come into the fold that were not here last year that are penciled in starters. And then you also add Fafa Picoult, who's an MLS journeyman, who's a really solid name too. That's been a part of Vancouver and Dallas and, various different teams that has played in MLS and is proven to be a solid piece when it needs to be. So, so there's definitely names on this team. So I personally think with what I saw from them just with Supporter Shield, and now that they have an established backline that I feel personally I feel better about, if they're able to defend even 20% better than they were last year, they're going to be so hard to beat. So incredibly hard. And that's not even counting if they figure out some goofy way to bring in somebody in the summer, some big name too, where they move somebody off and bring in one of Messi's other pals that we don't even know about yet. So who knows? But yeah, they would definitely be my front runner going into this year. No doubt.
Perfect.
Definitely.
All right. Well, I think that's going to kind of finish up the 2024 MLS interview. 3 things that we found interesting this season. And before we wrap it up, we do want to just kind of, this is where we would usually end, say our goodbyes, do our plugs, yada, yada, yada. But we do have one thing that we do kind of want to mention in regards to the other half of what this show is. So bi-weekly podcast, but on the weeks that we're not posting an episode, we're planning to do a bi-weekly soccer watch party. Obviously, with the North American leagues not playing yet, we are going to start our first one with Arsenal Manchester City, the 8:30 a.m. Pacific time game on February, what was it? I don't think I wrote that. I think it's the 7th, right?
But it's the 7th, yeah. It'd be
February 7th. So that's going to be our first bi-weekly watch party. The watch parties are going to be a big portion of what this show is, allow you guys, the community, to kind of interact, talk with us, live. That's where February 2nd, Arsenal versus Manchester City, 8:30 a.m. Pacific time. We'll have those links in below and everything like that for information. But there is a aspect of it that Biz wanted to explain and kind of to get you guys involved as well.
Yeah, so we've all talked about like various ways, because as Dill said at the very beginning of the podcast, we want to be very community focused. Dill will give all the information too, and it will be in our YouTube about like the Discord and everything like that to get involved. If you did just stumble onto us via YouTube, or stumble onto us somehow via Spotify's algorithm, all the better. But we will have all that information so you can become part of this community. But the thing that's important to all of us via our Twitch communities too is something that we've all kind of championed over time, is being very interactive with our communities and getting them involved, whether it's with like our saves on Football Manager when we're playing it ourselves on Twitch, or just like various things through the Discord with giveaways or whatever it looks like. So the best way that we could format a way to do that is doing a segment that we're going to be calling predictions, and we're going to be doing it at the end of every single episode that we have going forward. And I think this is actually an old idea that me and my brother had way back when we started an old website that I did look. It's been taken down since, because it was on like an old goofy domain. I would show it off if we could, but it was something that we did a long time ago, and we had the format of wanting to do some kind of like sports journalism angle, but having it be graded over time, and like going back to old like sports takes that we had based on like our own personal predictions and things like that, and grading them out together and kind of trying to hold yourself accountable, because I feel like there's just not a lot of that going on nowadays in sports, where people just kind of say stuff and then it gets forgotten in the ether, and then you can't you just get to keep going on with your life instead of getting made fun of for like what type of thing. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, preseason predictions that are just absolutely egregious, or you're just nailing it and you're spot on and everyone should be listening to everything you say. So when it comes down to it, what we will be doing each week and how we formatted this, so you the viewer will be able to get involved, which is something that was really important to us. But each week for us on the show, one of our watch party games will be part of this prediction. So we will pick what we think is going to happen. And right now, like Dill said, no North American games going on right now outside of some friendlies. So we're going to do 3 English Premier League games, including our watch party game, Arsenal versus Manchester City. And we will all, before we sign off today, pick what we think will happen with that game, and then hold ourselves accountable with that. We're going to keep lifetime going forward now for the duration of the podcast. We'll be keeping track of it in the Excel spreadsheet and marking it how we do, and keeping lifetime records of how we do over time. And then we are actually going to be allowing you guys to do the exact same thing. So each week in the Discord, we will be running a poll where you guys, the majority will rule, and that will be the community's choice on what you think will happen. It will be whether it will be a win, loss, or a draw for a team based on the matchup that we have set up. If you guys have a better record than all 3 of us as a community for the month, then we will do some form of giveaway that we have decided that based on, it'll probably be themed based on what it's going to be, but something along the lines of like a kit giveaway, something along the lines of some kind of gift card that corresponds with the podcast in some way, shape, or form. So we're really excited about it. The 3 games that we selected this week are, like Dill said, Arsenal versus Manchester City. We're also doing, it's going to be the 3 Sunday games that week on February 2nd. So Manchester United versus Crystal Palace, and then Brentford versus Dill's Tottenham's Hotspurs. So we'll start off with I'll just go right to left. So Pixel, you can do your pick for the Arsenal Man City game, and then we'll just kind of alternate as we go. Win, loss, or draw for the game. I'll mark it down so we have all of that in writing, and then I'll put it in the Discord and mark it. It is a lot of pressure
for the first pick and the game of our watch party. So I'm gonna be a little bit controversial here. I'm gonna go with the draw here.
Okay. All right.
Non-American of you.
Dill, what do we think? Arsenal, Man City, draw.
My heart says Arsenal, but they are North London rivals. But give me Arsenal win.
Ooh.
Arsenal win for Dill. Okay, so Arsenal win for Dill. Pixel draw, and I am also I had it pre-marked as a draw as well.
Oh my god!
I am also gonna do it.
First it's off the Jesus Ferrer train. Now it's a draw in our first prediction. Jesus.
All right. So Pix draw, Biz draw. All right, and then so game number 2, Pix. What do you think, Man U versus Crystal Palace?
I gotta go for Palace and my boy Munoz.
All right,
I think he might even be able to do something there. Maybe an assist or two. I don't know. We'll see.
I like that. Give me Palace as well. Man U in the mud. Muddier than Tottenham? No, but still muddy.
And then you guys are gonna hate me, but I'm going to draw on that one as well.
He's an odds guy. He's a true odds guy.
I am. I'm a bet. I'm going to win this thing. So we're out here. We're out here. All right. And last game, last but not least, Brentford versus very much in the mud Tottenham as well.
Come on, bro.
Pixel. What is your thoughts?
I'm scared of what I want to say and what I think.
All right.
Very interesting.
Be truthful. This
Very
is being graded, so be truthful.
I gotta go Brentford, man. Brentford at home.
All right, next. Tottenham win, obviously. Disrespectful.
Oh, goodness gracious. All right.
Dill's rethinking the people to the left and right.
Yeah, he's just like, man, is there anybody else want to do a North American podcast or anything like that right about now? Like, just, well, I am also going to, I'm not doing a draw for this one. I am going to pick Brentford for a W in this one.
I think that might be worse. That might be worse.
I know.
All right, guys. Well, it was a fun episode. No, those are good. Those are good predictions, guys. I think I'll be right. Two draws in a Brentford. Jesus. Okay.
I'm not that bad.
I didn't feel great about it. I gotta be honest, but it's what I think is gonna happen. I don't know what to tell you.
That's fair. All right. Well, I like that. Anything else on that section, Biz?
I do. So yeah, the last thing that we do have, and this is not going to necessarily be this one. We're going to probably introduce this as we go, but I did kind of reference about the idea about being graded over time. So we are doing that with the predictions, both with the community and ourselves, but we are also going to integrate also short-term and long-term like stats, team performance predictions, probably once a week-ish, like over time, just kind of like having some like long form bets that will have receipts on, in the long term where, I think so-and-so team will make playoffs in MLS. I think, this guy will score this, this many goals, and we'll kind of have some flag plants over the year where we can go back to and grade it and then kind of give segments for justification as to why we were wrong, why we were right, where, was there an incomplete grade on somebody being injured, things like that, where we'll touch on and just give a little bit more for the full landscape of not just MLS, but like CONCACAF Champions League. It will allow us to get into some other leagues and start to, maybe scout some other players that are of interest to us as well. So I think that's going to be really fun. I'm really excited about that portion of this. Also allowing the community to get involved. I think that's just something that, just in Twitch in general too, has always been really important to me as well, of like letting everybody be a part of this, because that's something that we want to feel like is building this community of, just kind of like-minded people like us, people that are curious about it, want to get into it, and join the revolution of craziness in North American soccer in the Americas. So, yeah.
All right, perfect. Well, I think that is it. A hefty first episode, probably longer than we'll usually go for most of these, but we're kind of finding our footing here. The introduction was a little longer. We kind of wanted to let you guys know what we're about, but expect another episode in about 2 weeks. Probably Mondays is going to be when they come out, and then watch parties mostly on the weekends, but depending on scheduling stuff for certain games, we'll do some weekday stuff too. But other than that, guys, I want to say thank you to my two co-hosts, Biz and Pix, for our first ever episode, and thank you to everyone who watched. This is just the beginning. We have a lot of stuff coming. The Twitter is going to have a lot of fun content. We're going to have a nice Instagram, YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and then other podcasting platforms is where you can find everything. But yeah, thank you guys. I hope you guys are excited for this journey. This is kind of our newest thing. We're Twitch guys. Now we're making the move into the podcast. What other saturated content thing can we get into next? I don't know. Pix, do you have anything to say before we go?
No, I'm just really excited. I think that one of the things that we really want to do here is we don't want to just be talking heads, talking at you. We want you guys to be involved. If you guys have anything that you guys want to be discussed, any topics, any ideas, any leagues, any players, anything, you guys can, drop us either through Twitter, Instagram, Discord. I think that, we really want to be representative of the community that, we're talking to. So if if you guys have any ideas, like I said, leagues, players, even subject matters or topics that we could discuss, I think that we really want to have open communication and really get the community involved in not just predictions but also in the content. So yeah, I appreciate everyone for stopping by.
Biz,
just thank you already if you're listening. It really does mean a lot to us. I think all of us are constantly just shocked by the amount of people that come out to support us through our Twitch endeavors and whatnot. And it's really the justification provided to allow us to kind of get our footing and start doing something like this. I think this is a little side passion project for all of us that we feel is omitted currently in the space of where we're where we're coming from. So we're really excited about what this could be and what it could turn out into. And we're excited. If you found us already, like I can guarantee you, like Dill said, this is probably longer than we were going for, but it's like watching us just kind of find our footing as we go forward here. But yeah, excited for what this is going to be and excited to do it with both of you guys. It'll be super fun.
Definitely.
All right. Well, perfect. Hopefully you guys enjoyed. Let us know in the comments, subscribe, like, all that stuff. It's been a while since I've been on YouTube, so I have to say all those things again. But other than that, hope to see you in the watch party February 2nd, Arsenal versus Manchester City, where I made the right prediction, a W, not a draw. And other than that, next episode should be out, about 2 weeks from when you guys are seeing this. And other than that, yeah, see you in the next one. Bye.
Take care, y'all.
Peace.